Chapter 305 in Volume 1 of Ayin Beis, the bottom of page 621. So here's a summary. This chapter begins a whole new section, subsection in Ayin Beis. This is critical. Because to be able to somewhat, I can't say master, but somewhat get control over understanding the flow of Ayin Beis, it's important to break it into parts. Because it's not just, there's sections and subsections and subplots. So this section begins, I would say, the last, from Shavuos Ayin Gimel, which began, let's just see here where it is. Yeah, Shavuos Ayin Gimel. Began the whole topic of the two types of energy there is. What the Ovis, what the patriarchs, what they transmitted, which was a divine energy that was commensurate or relative to the worlds, and what Matan Torah accomplished, which is Shavuos related, and that's to bring an energy that's beyond the worlds. So the whole interface, ultimately, between so-called existence and transcendence, which is the resident theme of Ayin Beis, in the last section, I would say I'm talking now, talking here, from chapter, chapter 127. So we're talking about this amount of pages here. Reish Mem Hey to Tafresh Chaf Aleph. Almost 245 to 621.
Wow.
Almost 400 pages. It was all one big section, which was also, I would call it the second section. Now we're going to the third section of explaining these two elements in the interface. And as we all know, the discussion there was how this interface is ultimately keter, the crown. And keter itself, he establishes chochma, the hidden wisdom, the unconscious wisdom, which is an interface between wisdom and existence, and that which is beyond. And that is ultimately Torah. To understand Torah, he went to a whole discussion that on the verse, if you remember, aromemcho Hashem ki asisa Pella, haPella and Aleph become one. And to understand that, he went into the whole discussion of the ma of chochma, of ma, the bittul, which explains how energies and containers meet. Tohu is the antithesis, meaning it is a world of chaos, where the energies do not have tolerance for each other and they don't have any hiskalos interconnectivity. And ultimately, ma, which is Torah, is what helps create the bittul that brings these two worlds together. That is, in a way, a summary of everything. The pasuk there was Hashem Elokei ata aromemcho shimcha ki asisa Pella eitzis meracha kamuna uman. Now, the last thing in the last chapter, 304, was a summary of how Yesh and Ayin meet, how transcendence and existence meet, and they meet through the fact that both the container, which represents existence, and transcendence, the energy, which represents transcendence, each of them assume the properties of the other, and with the measure of bittul, they join together as one. The energy introduces to the container a level of bittul it can never have on its own. On its own, it can only sense transcendence to bittul hayesh, that I exist, but I also relate to something higher. The energy introduces it to a divine type of transcendence that leads it to a completely different level. And the container contributes to the energy that it should be integrated, should be internalized, and that it should descend below and fulfill the purpose of all of existence, which is to transform the material world into a spiritual home. And then the conclusion of 304 was, there's two ways this is done. Tefillah and Torah. This is critical, because this is the whole next section, I would say the next 100 pages, and maybe even more, is all about the two ways that this is done. Tefillah does it from the bottom up, and Torah does it from the top down. So now we're going into the discussion, after he said that Matan Torah is ultimately the interface, the question, however, is the interface can happen two ways. We can reach upward, or something is transmitted down below. So he explains that tefillah goes from the bottom up, and he goes through a whole discussion how the ladder of tefillah, you first start by acknowledging there's something greater. Then that's Maidani. And Haidu. Then you come to an emotional relationship with it. But it's still not yet comprehensible. You just emotionally relate to something beyond. Then comes Shema, or the Bichus Krishma and Shema, which is Echad. We come to a comprehension of it. And then comes to Amida, Shemoneh Esrei, we're called total bittul for it. So tefillah takes existence into transcendence. Torah brings transcendence into existence. What does Torah do? Torah was given to us, Matan Torah, the gift. Something was transmitted. In tefillah you initiate, in Torah God initiates. So it's given from above. We're given a blueprint. We're given a book of wisdom. We're given tools which now, what does that do? It introduces a bittul that you cannot reach through tefillah on your own. So from the bottom up, you reach, it's internalized. But Torah adds an appreciation of the divine that is a real transcendence. Ultimately, in Ayin Beis, both are necessary, but the real focus is Torah. I could say Samach Vav, the real focus is more tefillah. Because prayer is really getting out of your existence and recognizing something beyond you. And Torah helps integrate a higher level of Elokus and divine into existence. Now, to understand this, he's going to go into a new verse, which is the pasuk aromemcho Elokei haMelech. It's interesting that this parallel is very similar to the verse that he just was elaborating on, as I said, for the last, also, how many chapters was that? Let me see where it began. Because they both use the word remamus, which if you relate to is actually the whole theme of Ayin Beis, if you learn from the beginning, is all about remamus, keter. That keter is the ultimate interface. That's remamus. So the first verse that we used was, where is it? Oh, yeah. In Yeshaya Chafei, Havaya Elokei Ata Aromemcho Shimcha Shmecha. He explained that the whole thing is bringing down, through all the 10 spheres, the remamus of the divine, the transcendence. Now he's beginning L'havin Kol Zeh B'Teisus Bir, to understand all this with additional explanation, with additional beer, additional elaboration. Yesh Lahagdim, we preface Mashakosov aromemcho Elokei haMelech. So again, aromemcho, meaning, how exalted are you, Elokei, our God, the King. That's the parallel to what he began, as I said, in chapter, keep going back and forth here. Chapter Kuf Pei Dal, 184. Just a parallel, a very interesting parallel here. He's going to explain now, in the next, I would say, as I said, 100 pages, he's going to explain how there's two interpretations in this verse. One is tefillah, and one is Torah. One is, aromemcho Elokei haMelech, is lifting God up, is lifting ourselves up to that level. And the second interpretation will be Torah that brings it down. And in doing so, he goes through this whole discussion, which you've been learning every day, the 4 different things, Gilead Helem, Yesh Ma'ayin, Koyach and Poel, and all that. It's all to understand Elokei, the word Elokei, our God. So this is just another layer of interpretation of this interface between the divine and existence. So it says, okay, and the meaning of the word aromemcho that I will exalt you, I will elevate you. Hainu, b'chinas reimus ein seif shemereim muvdal min ha'elemus. Referring to the level of reimus ein seif. In simple English, when we sense a sense of awe, when you think about that which is beyond us, you sense there's something beyond, that's aromemcho. It's a sense of awe. Reimus ein seif is the, how would you translate reimus? It means the exaltation of the reimus. But reimus also means, when you meet a person who you see is like a melech, shichme, maile, gvei, mekalam, you sense a person is in a different caliber. So it lifts you up to another place. I remember because reimus ein seif. Shemerumam, it's exalted, umuvdal, and separate from the world. As I said, this is a recurrent theme through whole Ayin Beis because it's about, this is like keter. Keter. When you see a crown, it's above the head. So the mind doesn't comprehend it. It just senses something is beyond. So keter, interestingly, the physical keter, that it's above all the whole king, the highest part of the king, is symbolic of something that's beyond the head, beyond the mind, beyond the heart. It's a keter, crown.
You lift the Ein Sof, you lift yourself to Ein Sof.
The two interpretations there will be. One is tefillah, one is Torah. So he says like this. That's reimus ein seif. I remember. The hainu b'chinas hakeser. That's the level of keser. There you go, keser. The beginning of Ayin Beis starts with keser. The three interpretations in keser, and all about keser being the interface. Keser Torah. As it's known, the beginning of the cosmic order, of the structure of existence. When we say ishtalshalos, think of it of the structure of existence. In order for us to relate how the structure experiences transcendence, you have to first understand the structure. So it begins from chochma, which is reishis hagili, the beginning of revelation. Just to explain a moment, what's the first thing that we are consciously aware of is a spark of an idea. So when you stand in awe of something, you may not have chochma yet. You just are in awe. When does it become hishtalshlus? We're talking like an avodah, is when you become aware of it. And awareness always begins with chochma. Chochma is the first flash of awareness. It's like a first recognition on our terms. So it's the beginning of a divine transcendent reimamus that's above it all, entering into our existence. That's why it's in the form of chochma. It's only a spark. If you understood it too well, it would lose its so-called integrity somewhat. It would lose its personality of being above us. So chochma becomes that interface, as he's discussed at length, that you sense something beyond, but it's already beginning of your comprehension. I mean, it's a tremendous concept. It's where non-existence meets existence, is in our mind. Imagine there was no chochma. Imagine the only thing you begin with is bina. You'd never have that flash. You'd never have that wonder, the sense of wonder in an intelligent discourse would not exist. Wonder is divine. Mazeh. What was that? It would become too much existence. I understand. You see what happens when chochma enters into bina. Now it becomes me understanding how I understand it. It's all about me understanding it. In chochma, it's not about you understanding, me understanding. Chochma is that the thing is being piercing into you and entering into your existence. So chochma is the reishis hagili. Ubchinas hakeser l'mayla mishtalshlus. And the level of keser, you see here, if you think about it, this is he's summing up so much of what we learned. And level of keser is higher than structure. Remember, the word ishtalshlus literally means actually evolution. Shalshelis. It means ishtalshlus means a gradation, a chain. Shalshelis. But in a sense, it's like a chain of events that evolve, so to speak, from level to level. Seder ishtalshlus, cosmic order, or you can call it the structure of existence, is Seder ishtalshlus. You say l'mayla Seder ishtalshlus, you're talking about that which is beyond structure. And obviously we have both in our lives. And the ultimate interface is where you introduce beyond structure into structure, or through davening structure leading you to beyond structure.
You sometimes use the word devolution, which I meant to one thing
because it's diminishing, right?
But this is coming down.
No, yeah, I understand, because it's a diminishing energy. Okay. And being that it's higher than the structure, that's why rumim. It's aromemcho. It's merumim. It's exalted. It's above. It's beyond the worlds. V'haramaz b'zeh chelikim daf peches. The Ramaz, Ramoshe Zakuto, who was a great Kabbalist from the students of the Arizal. And he's a very often oft-cited source in Chassidus. He writes on Zer Cheli Gimel, third volume of Zer, Daf Peches. Just want to say this. The Rebbe Rashab does this a lot through Ayin Beis. He actually quotes chapter and verse, which obviously means, of course, he knew everything by heart, but when he quotes it, it means it's fundamental. So it's something to look at. Many times he'll just say it says in Zer, or he'll say it's Chaim. But there are a lot of these fundamental concepts when he quotes it, when he says where it is because it's almost like telling you go look there to really.
Is there in English a Zohar that has the Vilna, the way it's set up so that when you get quotes from the Zohar and Chassidus, you could look to that Zohar and find it set up exactly? No.
There are parts, but they've never done it properly. I think the English translations of Zohar, I don't remember if they actually.
They're all set.
Huh?
They're not in the same sort of
Right. But they don't have in the back there a place to snow the pages. Yeah, because a lot of the English translations are not written by people who necessarily are in the Torah world that respect those pages.
Mm-hmm.
Even Shas, Schottenstein, obviously, yeah. But some of the older ones, they just would translate them, and you have no clue where you are.
Could you take 1 minute only? I know we're learning that about the Zayah, because I am bummed sometimes when people are saying that the Zayah was not written by the Rabbi.
Yeah. The Zayah is like this. The Zayah was discovered in the 15th century in two different caves, one in Mantoba and one in Cremona, in Italy. And there's written, the Chidor writes about it in Shem Magdalim. It was discovered, the people who discovered saw the text, they had no idea what it was. They showed it to different people, no one knew, until they showed it to some Torah scholars who right away understood that this is the Zohar. The Zohar.
They heard of it, but they didn't.
No, because the Zohar was Torah B'Shabbat Peh. Those knew. There were people who knew it, like the Rambam. It was passed on generation to generation.
And they knew that expression Zohar. They knew there was a sefer called Zohar.
Yeah, because the real Kabbalah. I don't know if you ever want to really read the history of Kabbalah. It's an excellent introduction in a sefer called Shemer Amunim. Yosef Irgas is a great Kabbalist himself. That's one of the hidden gems. That's a book I would myself personally want to translate into English. Excellent. Shemer Amunim. Shemer Amunim is quoted in Chassidus.
Who wrote it?
Yosef Irgas. Also Italian Makubal. But it's authoritative. It's a full authority. You know what it is? It's actually written in a form of question and answer between a philosopher, a Torah scholar, and a Kabbalist. And he's asking questions. Why do we need Esosfiras? Why do we need to know this stuff? Why do we need Eir? It's like an excellent primer and an introduction to Chassidus. Excellent. You won't believe it. It's very, very contemporary written. It's one of I always wanted to translate something like that because it's very good. So when they gave it out, it's an introduction to it by whoever published it. It's a history of Kabbalah all the way from the time of Shas, all the way from the beginning to Moshe Rabbeinu, all the way to our times. And essentially, who were the Mukabbalah? Mukabbalah were like Talmud. Think of Kabbalah like what was Gemara like before Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi wrote it down, the Mishnah and Gemara. So Kabbalah till Arizal basically, or till they published Zohar, was in that category. It was Torah Shabbat Peh, known by very few. But in every generation, he writes for the whole Shalshalos, how it came. Like there was the Ravid, there was a Ravid, there was a it had a student who was a blind guy. There's all kinds of interesting whole, and then how the Ramban renewed it, which is really now talking 11th century, and then how it came all the way to the Arizal, obviously, the Ramak, the great Kabbalist in Tzfat, like they revived it in the real way, and they started really publishing and stuff like that. So going back to the Zohar was discovered. So the secular world has, for some reason, determined that by Yehuda Halevi or whatever, they determined, or not Rabbi, Leon, what's his name? Yehud
What's the name? I forgot the name.
De Leon.
600 years ago.
Yeah. So they did, because he was one of the first ones active in publishing it. So the secular so-called attribute the Zohar to him, but the Zohar itself and what we accept, and all the authorities that read the Zohar said they knew the things there that were there before. There's no way it could be from him. And the Rashbi, in the end of the Zohar, talks about the Rashbi's death, passing, like Beimer, and talks about how he revealed this, and he told Rabbi Abba, his student, to write down everything. So the Zohar was written specifically by Rabbi Abba, dictated by the Rashim Bayachai.
But it's accepted, like the Alter Rebbe quotes the Rashbi.
Any authority in Torah, starting the Rizal, Zohar is from Rashbi. The secular world, fine. So they're not authorities on our texts. It would be like, they also say the Bible was written by certain individuals. I mean, that's the same school of thought. There's those that, we're talking about Torah scholars. The Zohar was always a holy book. There was no detractors. There were a few people who wondered then in the 15th century what this is. Is it real? Is it forged? Etc. But then once you have authority, the Rizal is the final say in all these things. Once you have authorities that accept, it's like anything. Like Shas is accepted. This is it. That's it. So the Zohar is accepted as a book from Rashbi, and Alter Rebbe for sure. I mean, our authority is clearly the Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe.
So Ramoshe Zakuto is a Pirush on Torah?
Yeah, it's a Pirush on Zohar.
So it's like that.
It's included mostly in a book called Migdash Melech. On the Zohar, he cites the Ramaz. But then today they published already the Ramaz himself. But it's mostly included. See, there's a few, the fundamental Mefarshim on Zohar are Migdash Melech and Erachama. The Migdash Melech collects from the Arizal, from the Ramaz, and from others. And Erachama is from the Ramak. The Ramak and some other Kabbalah. They're both compilers of the classic commentaries, mostly from the Arizal and the Ramak and that generation on Zohar. You really can't learn Zohar without those commentaries. That's like Rashi almost.
The Mikdash Melech and what is this?
And Ir HaChama. There are more. There are others, but those are the two main ones.
The Migdash Melech is the Ramaz.
No, Migdash Melech quotes the Ramaz a lot. Migdash Melech is one of the Mekabalim. I forgot his name, who wrote the Migdash Melech. He cites the Ramaz because Ramaz. Many of these volumes of these texts were not. They were only in manuscript form. So the Kabbalists themselves would cite them because when they would publish, they would cite them, even though some stuff was only written.
So this new sefer with like Matuk Midrash and all this.
Yeah, some of them are reliable. It depends who they quote. Look, the Sulam, for example, his translation is good, but we don't consider authoritative.
That's the next section.
It's like Seichel Anushi, basically.
That's the Ashlag, yeah?
Yeah, Ashlag, yeah. So the Seichel Anushi, meaning it's like people with Seichel. Yeah. There's a Hebrew translation of Zohar that the Rebbe Rashab gave a Haskama to.
Which one?
It's the only book it's a Hebrew translation called Zohar B'Lashon HaKodesh. Sections of Zohar were translated in Hebrew from Aramaic. It's the only book the Rebbe Rashab actually wrote a Haskama, gave an endorsement to.
What does it mean, this Sulam? Translation is good. He did not understand the concept?
The Kabbalah was always seen as it's not just being a scholar translates. You needed to have a level of, I guess, Kedusha, or a level of, let's say, the Kabbalah from a Kubal before you. So I'm not, so that he's not necessarily.
He was not an authority
in that sense of the word. So in Nigla, it's not so makbid on it. They don't. But in Kabbalah, it's a selis nekia. It's a much purer.
One more question, because this is important. It comes up. The whole story with Berg, which is based a lot of Sulam, I think.
Yeah. Berg claims he's received from a guy called he has Brandwine, who was Makabel from Ashlag. But then there's a break in the chain. From Ashlag, you go straight to the Arizal. Problem is how to get from the Arizal to Ashlag. See, I always, when I speak in Kabbalah, I don't want to knock anyone else. I'm not interested in knocking, but you have to state the facts. Whenever I give a talk in Kabbalah, I first of all say, those that say don't know, and those that know don't say. So that puts a dilemma. If I say anything, it means I don't know anything. So then I say, I heard from the Rebbe, who was the son of a Makubal, who was the son-in-law of a Makubal, who was the son of a Makubal, Rebbe Rashab. That's why the Mashiach is so important, because The Rebbe goes direct link straight to Moshe Rabbeinu, straight to David haMelech. So there was a family of Mukabon. The Alter Rebbe was Makabel from the Maggid, the Baal Shem Tov, to the Maral. The Maral goes back to the Arizal. In other words, my point is that you have to have in Kabbalah, it's not just enough to just understand it, because there's things that have to come from. It's really similar to Teresh Shabbal Peh. Not someone can come tomorrow and say, "Listen, I have a new shot, I have a new Gemara that I found." It has to be received from someone ish mit ish. It's a key to the integrity of it all.
Okay, that's why it's
Now,
called Kabbalah.
Exactly. So let's continue.
Simon, I'm sorry to bother you, but it's an opportunity. I have to find the whole. Now we're going a little further. The whole movement with Berg. I know some people that are, when you're talking to them, are really very impressive
Madonna.
with their years. No, I'm talking seriously. I had a student that was unbelievable, and I met her parents that are very involved in the Berg. Is this going in the right direction? Is something wrong there or not?
Would you mind if I say this when we're done with this chapter?
Okay.
Huh?
Yeah, no. I want to hear that.
So Ramaz B'Zerich Elegim Daf Perches writes, Kosov, Shascholos Atzilus U'B'chinas Chochmas Timah. This is a critical chapter, by the way, that connects everything. Chochmas Timah. The Ramaz writes, the beginning of Atzilus is from Chochmas Timah, not just Chochma, the hidden Chochma, which is unconscious Chochma. As we learned in Keser, Chochma of Arich is called Chochmas Timah. If you remember, that was a key piece of the interface, because to say Atik is too much removed, Arich is part of existence already, the beginning of existence. So it's Chochmas Timah that becomes the bridge. Essentially, the unconscious mind is the bridge. The conscious mind is the bridge on our terms, because we consciously sense it. Correct? So that's Chochmas Timah. So it says beginning of Atzilus is actually Chochmas Timah.
Where is Atzilus coming from?
Huh?
The Chochmas Timah is before Atzilus, the source. The
Right. So he says it's the beginning of Atzilus, the Ramah says. The outer level of the hidden wisdom, hidden Chochma, is the beginning of Atzilus. Shazel Mokar Chochma Hagluya. That's the source of conscious wisdom. You remember we discussed, I gave the example of the faucet, where let's think of the reservoir, body of water, that how does it flow into our consciousness? So you need a filter, because if it just flowed without any filters, without any breaks, without any stops, it would overwhelmingly become mad. So the whole beauty of wisdom, how it flows in our mind, is actually consciousness essentially is concealed intelligence, limited intelligence. Because if you let the flow come without any chambers, without any compartmentalization, without any stop, we couldn't take it. It would be like Eir and Sof without the Tzimtzum. So you need the Tzimtzumim. So Chochmas Timah is the unconscious collective unconsciousness, whatever you want to call it. Koyach HaMaskil, where ideas come from.
That's not Arich.
It is Arich. It's Chochma of Arich. And there's
The lowest part is our.
Yeah.
The Chochmas Timah.
Now, Primis Chochmas Timah obviously is connected to Atik. Look, think of it like this. Look, Atzilus is here. The crown, Keser, is above Atzilus. Okay. The question is how these two communicate. So God created in a way that we have chochma. Chochma's sense is what? Where'd that idea come from? Sense of awe, wonder. That what is because chochma is like the opening of a small little channel from a much greater place that now enters into our existence. Okay? So we sense it when you're conscious. That's chochma gluya. What we're not conscious of is the other side of the curtain, where it came from. So if you're saying conscious chochma is here, unconscious chochma would be here, and there's a small little channel that connects the two. We're aware of it once it enters us. We're not talking about Bina yet. We're talking about the first Gili, first revelation. If you travel backwards, you go through this little channel, Chochmas Timah. Chochmas Timah itself there's an outer level, which is more Arich. There's a high upper level of it. If you break it down, that is manifests Atik. We said Primis Chochma, Primis Atik, pleasure, that all is connected to it all. We even said actually that Chochma is really pleasure, essentially, that just looks like Chochma. So it's really divine essence. I mean, the essence meaning on the Lekasa level. So it's not Chochma trying to understand godliness, it's godliness manifesting in what we call wisdom. This is really what it is. It's godliness. That was what he said many chapters ago. So now he's saying, he's like I said, this is somewhat of a critical chapter because it's a connecting point between the earlier Maimorim and where we're going. So this This in general is Atzilus. So in other words, he's extending that the Ramaz is saying Atzilus doesn't start with chochma geluya, it starts with chochma stima, meaning the outer chochma stima. He just, basically the structure begins a little earlier than we would usually think. You'd think structure begins once you're conscious. She said, no, it's already the unconscious, the outer layer of the unconscious wisdom. I mean, psychologically speaking, they know about unconscious. They don't talk about an outer and inner unconscious that I know of. So right there you have a new psychological map, model. Okay, the im came. Yeah, because he said, because Ramaz, it's all, that's Bechlal and Atzilus. This is part of, this in general is part of the emanation. It's really, because again, we're talking interface here. The Rebbe Rashab is right, exactly, and dissecting exactly where they meet. Where does heaven kiss earth?
Where's the interface?
Right, exactly. So the interface is happening everywhere, but at the end of the day, there are places where are critical junctions, because when Gvul meets Bli Gvul, what happens there? So chochma is a perfect example. You could say, when you say chochma, you say, I understand it. No, I don't understand it yet, but it's the beginning of an idea. So there's an element of awe and wonder, but there's an element of consciousness. It's like a spark of consciousness, but it's not yet. It would be like the moment of conception of a new child. That's an example, a seed. Moment of conception. Today you have images of it. There's nothing there. It's just, but you can't say it is nothing. There's not nothing. There's something. But it's such a microcosmic concentrated seed. You can't imagine it's going to become a child. You see those images. It's almost like seed where seed fertilizes egg. Something happens. It's magical. Something happened, and that's where.
In chochma you feel it.
Yeah, in chochma you feel it. But you see, as soon as you try to understand it too well, you can't. You can start saying, where did that idea come from? I don't know. It's ayin. Chochma ayin timotza. That's the ayin that he keeps talking about. Chochma ayin. There's something wonderful. But at the same time, it's consciousness. And this consciousness is going to start developing into a much greater consciousness. I mean, it's unbelievably tremendous because this is it.
It's almost trivialized in Tanya 2 days ago when he said when you've arrived and the Chabad of the Eibishter emerges with the Chabad of you.
Yeah. It's when you think about it, you could just dwell on this your whole life, just thinking about this point, because it's where all the action takes place. It's where the seed is fertilized. It's not like we're living already full-blown lives. It's where it all began. I want to just throw something in here, which is not directly relevant, but it's something I said during one of the classes that I think is critical. I mean, we were learning about Eir and Keli, so that Eiris are pshutim, are relative to the containers. The energy is formless, essentially, more nebulous or amorphous. So someone said, okay, what does that mean exactly? So I said, and Kalim of Atzilus, you do understand. They're also not physical containers. So then I realized, and I think I want to elaborate a moment on it. It's just to show us how far away we are from these concepts. In Seichel we understand it, but here, think about it. We are fundamentally negushim dika people. We're physical people. I'm going to give an example. You take an apple, you look at an apple, that's asiyah gashmis and chumris. We all can relate to that, right? You can touch it, you can measure it, color, taste, shape, everything. The Rebbe Rashab says an example of a sir ruchnis would be, what does this apple look like? Close your eyes now and imagine the apple. It's an imaginary apple, the same proportions. It's an apple, not an orange. But you're not going to open up the brain and find an apple there. It's an image, a mental image of an apple. But now it has it shaped everything, but it's not tangible. This is asir ruchnis. The question now is, what is Yitzira Ruchnis? What's the Yitzira dimension of this apple? Here already we're almost lost. You have to find now something that's as abstract as the image compared to the apple is abstract compared to the image. And this is still only Yitzira, and only the Kalim of Yitzira. Then you go to Bria, then you go to Atzilus, and you're trying to understand what are the Kalim of Atzilus of this apple, and let alone the Eris. It means that we're too physical to even go that far. And people are talking about Lifnei Tzimtzum and Ak, and places where there's no containers. Now I know we talk about it, but if you really want to internalize this, you have to come. Now someone will say, okay, you know what you did now is destroy my whole understanding of Chassidus. I said, no. This is what Chassidus is not nigla, where you're learning something and the only thing you're lacking is more comprehension. I'll learn a little more, I'll struggle more, and I'll get it. Here you have to think differently. The whole point of Chassidus is to refine your way of thinking. To make, instead of thinking like a physical person, think like a spiritual person. Instead of looking at physical world, think of the spirituality of the world. That makes you more sensitive, it makes the world more sensitive, and you start realizing what the divine is. So when you say, the Alter Rebbe saw the beam, and he saw the keter, the godliness in the beam. We don't even know what that means, because as I said, we can because we're not even attuned by us. It's some intellectual exercise. I'm only saying it to understand that all this is a lot of language here, but you really have to ultimately work hard in beginning to think in those terms. So there are many layers here. So when we talk about chochma, it's a great example because what you have is in your life, we all have experience, the aha moment. Something, an epiphany. What's an epiphany? Epiphany is, what does it feel like? Epiphany is you, till a moment before everything was going right, regular, and suddenly, flash of light. And there's an unbelievable pleasure, awareness, like your eyes opened. It's an epiphany. What does Chassidus say? The divine has entered into you for a moment.
Even a simple thing where you don't remember somebody's name, you're trying to think of a word for something, and then you work for 5 minutes, and then it comes to you. It's the same type of thing. But
Yeah. I mean, it's not the same thing as, let's say, getting. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could even say it's seeing your child after a while, and you suddenly meet them, and there's a geschmack, a feeling of reunion or whatever. But those are examples. But the point is, anyway, I just wanted to say this as an aside. I don't know how relevant it is directly here, but it's just important to qualify, to understand. So to be able to do this,
Rabbi could not write the word Atzilus.
right?
He had no problem with that.
right.
I could write Tzimtzum, Kav, Lifnei Tzimtzum, Atzmos.
No problem with that.
No, but you see, to me, this is not negating what we know. It's actually making you wiser because you realize that when Moshe said, "Show me your face and live," and Hashem says, "You can't see me and live." I mean, no one can see me. What does he mean? He means to say, "You want to be you and see me?" It doesn't work that way. You're not going to be you. You're going to see me. You won't be you. You want to be you. You can't see me. And to be able to travel in this direction requires. I mean, I can imagine Chassidim who would sit and meditate on nature. You look at the trees, and after a while, the water. You start saying, "1 second, water? Water is not water. Water is Chesed of Atzilus that went through Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, and now it looks like water." To them, the water would melt away into being so water flows downwards. That's Chesed. Not only example. I'm talking about a moshel. It is Chesed manifest in this world. So you could come to that place, and then if you start seeing the world every second that way, just for a moment, I can't put myself in the Rebbe's shoes, but I could see the Rebbe looking at a room like us, and instead of seeing physical people sitting in chairs, sees flames, sees bodies of light, different types of light. But obviously, he also sees your body. That's the way eyes of Atzilus see things. I see flames. You look like this body of light. There's this This
This is what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. You want to be what you are, and you want to see in the way that I see.
fields of light. Fields of light. That's the question. Fields of light. So I'm looking at Dr. Lane. I'm looking at what field of light are you? And then you see all the potential. And then, of course, you see how little is actualized. I don't mean you, I mean all of us. So you have a real image. This is how someone sees things on that level. It's like you look at somebody, I see body, I say a white beard, and I know you're little, it's okay, you're a good guy, a smart guy. Sometimes you see a little potential, but it's all completely from the bottom up. If you're looking like from the cover inward, how deep can you go already? There's no picture. This is essentially, this is the perspective. So if you look from chochma stima to chochma gluya, you see one thing. You look from chochma gluya to chochma stima, you don't see much. That's why you call it ayin. Yeshma ayin. Poop. Just popped into it. Where did it come from? I have no idea. Out of thin air. The other perspective sees it the other way around. I'm where it's at, and you're getting some little glimpse, and you think you're suddenly a big knacker. Okay.
You heard about the Maharash that he had a problem to see the world. So there are two things. One discourse said it's an tzedek had to say 250 Ma'amorim until he started to see the world, and another nusach that he gave him a stick that made him to be able to.
Yeah, we don't have that issue, but I'm glad to hear someone did. You need someone to remind us. It's a dark Welt. I remember my brother was standing in front of me. The Rebbe was speaking of Rashi. He was saying children. Yes, children. How do they know there's a cow? Because Rashi says there's a thing called a cow. Yeah. How do you know there's a world? The Eibishter says, but so he pointed and he said, you ask a child. From wann weißt das a dark Welt? It was Vayakhel Pekudei, Mem Gimel. How do you know there's a world? The Rebbe didn't wait. I remember he pointed and said, kind, kind, wann weißt das a dark Welt? That's what the Rebbe said. How do you know there's a world?
Your brother?
Because he was a little kid, he was standing in front of me, And my brother was busy with something, so I pinched him. I said, someone's talking to him. And then the Rebbe answered, how does he know? Because it says, Bereshis bara Elokim Shemaim v'Sa'aretz. Maybe it's an illusion. See, we don't have that question. I mean, there's a world. I've got to pay my bills. I have a pain in my back, these type of things. So anyway, Chachma Gluya has a... V'im kem b'chinas haRomemcho b'keser b'chinas keser shebekeser. What does that mean? So in that's the case, aromemcho shebekeser, is keser shebekeser. Because keser itself is aromemcho. And keser, within keser, is the aromemcho in keser itself. But why are we talking this aromemcho in keser? How do you say that?
That's only from looking down to the up. I mean, but we look at the completely different way. We call keser will or type of will. I mean, not type of idea.
Well, look, when you look from the top down, it goes like this. Yeah. 1 second. When you look from the top down, it works like this. See, we living in a scientific world, what we see, and we explore, we observe, and then we try to understand what else is going on deeper. And you only can go that far. The Torah reveals to us what's going on from the top down, what's happening behind the curtain, like in the engineering room. So it works like this. This is the beginning of the hemshech. That's where it starts. I'm connecting it. He begins that first interface of all. Remember, God doesn't need anybody, doesn't need anything. The etzem of something doesn't even need himself. Meaning, he doesn't have to be conscious of himself. The best example would be when you're just content and in your own little place, not even thinking. I mean, it's not possible. We all think, but think of you and your etzem. So the first interface happens is keser. Keser is the desire. I don't mean desire necessarily pleasure. Desire and the will to want something. In this case, to want a dira b'tachtein. So he says clearly that every world, the keser of that world, is wanting that world, the desire for that world. That desire is the first step out of essence to connect. It's still not a world, it's a desire for it. Then comes the structure. So the whole Ayin Beis is how does the structure reconnect to the will and then reconnect to the source. That's the role, that's the flow. Source, desire, will, existence. Now existence has to go backwards. Keser is the middle place, where essence wants me. Or if you had no connection with me, you're sitting in your world, I'm sitting in my world. I'm just using a human example. And you're fine. But then you have a desire, you want something. You come to me and say, let's sit down. It's your desire in your soul to connect that connects you to something outside of you. Now, the desire state obviously is very called nebulous. What does it look like? That's the part that's hard to understand. But for us to reconnect, if I had to connect to you, I'd want to know not just what you want from me. I'd want to know why you desire. What's your desire like? Then I connect to that. Then I connect to you through that. I mean, just using a human example. Obviously, with God, it's a whole.
I mean, we can say Roman moves the other way, just for Yitzira. I mean, it's like.
Oh no!
Anything above us is Roman moves.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. I just spoke the big picture.
Yeah.
Now, the smaller picture, of course, is climbing the ladder, climbing the stages. Yeah. So anyway, Remus Shabbat begins Keser Shabbat Keser.
Can you say Kemo Haratzon? If really see we're saying the Keser is the Ratzon, so I saying Kemo.
What's that? And I'm wondering why he's saying Keser. We've got to read on because I'm not sure. aromemcho, aromemcho. How do you pronounce it?
The chochma stemo is the keser.
Keser Shabbat Keser. Yes, the Keser Shabbat Keser. I'm not sure whether it looks like chochma stemo is the Keser Shabbat Keser. Well, kamoy harotzon shalamal mekol hakeches. Now he's explaining it in Chabad, with intelligence, like the rotzon, the desire, the shalamal mekol hakeches, that's higher than all the faculties. Umuvdal mahem, and separate from them, like he said with Keser. Keser is lamaila and merumam and muvdal. Shekol hakeches hein ba'agbola boim b'chinas eslapshus v'tfisa. All the faculties are defined, are finite, and they manifest in a slapshusdik way. They internalized, integrated.
At the level of Ratzon.
No, not talking about Ratzon. Ratzon is above that. The faculties on their own are harbagbola boim b'chinas eslapshus v'tfisa. They all manifest within their particular energies and within containers. Slapshus is like dressing up. Tfisa means that they're graspable. They're internalized.
No, it seems like it's.
Mashenkin harotzen. 1 second.
Yeah.
Mashenkin harotzen. On the other hand, rotzen, however, shukeich bilti mugul be'ena b'abab b'chinas slapshus v'tfisa. Rotzen is unlimited, undefined, and does not manifest in any distinct and the confined way. This was going back all the way, the whole Hemshech, where he talks about like the power of sight in the soul manifests in the eyes, the power of hearing in the ears, the power of intelligence in the mind, emotions in the heart. Then Ratzon doesn't have a particular container. Ratzon is the desire of the human being. So it's unlimited. It's more of a reflection of you, where your faculties are more your tools. As we've as discussed, elaborated, explained earlier at length, being the inyan of desire is in chapter 49 and on. Remember, the first 49 chapters, that's called the first chapter establishes what Keser is, the connection. Then he goes on after the first chapter and says, to understand what Keser is, the interface, we have to understand existence first. So we'll then understand the interface to existence. And for 48 chapters, he explains existence, structure, Eris and Kalim, Atzilus. And in 49 and on, he goes back to keser. Just to see here how it's all like coming together. And that leads into the whole thing with keser. Then that goes into what Torah is and interfaces and all that we've discussed, Eris and Kalim. And now he's coming back to the next stage of the Hemshech.
From 49 till here is all about keser.
No, I didn't say that. From 49 and on,
Ratzon.
Ratzon Keser, yes. Yes, you could essentially say it is, yes, from 49 all the way till here. With different elements in it, yeah.
Now 1 to 49, the same just establishes.
Till 49 is 48 chapters, he explains existence, structure. Pnimi, Pnimi. As what he said here, the keter says they are inside the containers. The faculties in the containers. And this is the subject. This is the meaning. When we say ein tam l'rotzen, that rotzen does not have a reason. Desire has no tam, has no reason. And sherotzen ein nitzvus b'tam, because desire does not manifest in reason. Reason is already a faculty. Shegam kisheyesh tam l'rotzen. Because even when there is a reason for someone's desire, nevertheless, the will is in the etzem mahus of the person, etzem mahus of the entity, meaning the essence and the inner personality of this entity that wants it. It's only that there's a reason for the will, for the desire, but not the desire itself is on the level of a reason, like it is in intellect and emotions. In intellect and emotions, the thing itself has reason. So ratzon its own, desire its own, is beyond reason, even though there may be a reason for it. Is that understood?
No.
The reason.
Okay.
What does it mean it's behind reason?
It's the essential bechira of people and God. I mean, that's the essential God-like
But this
thing about
pure
people.
is
Having
having a
Ratzon
tam,
is
no?
It's right. It's your free will.
You can explain it two ways. The first, probably most practical way, that what it means here. When someone desires something, their soul desires something. So the desire itself, there may be a reason that you can explain what the desire or why the desire is there, but the desire itself is not necessarily a reasonable one, meaning it's not limited or defined by the reason. I'm trying to find an example. For example, you find people desire something, and even if the reason is no longer there, and you tell them,
It's a tiny, no?
he's saying Ratzon here, but Ratzon is also could be the same thing.
What's
When I say desire, by the way, I didn't mean Ratzon.
Reason for Arit is Atik. No?
No, fine. No, one second. You could see, they call it, when you want something, even if someone says, well, 1 second, it may not be reasonable, or maybe the reason that you think you want it is not there anymore, you still can want it. Not necessarily unholy. Because desire, by definition, is the nefesh being drawn to something.
Reason doesn't have to be reasonable.
It doesn't have to be reasonable at all, not. No, but he's saying even when there is a reason for it, it's not the reason that defines and confines it. That's one thing.
Does the reason come from within you or from the outside? You find a reason for it because you want it.
That was going to be my second thing that I was going to say. That because there's first you want it, then manifests in a reason. Like God wanted a world, then he created a reason to justify it, so to speak. Or he created a system, not to justify it, a system of logic that's commensurate to his will. So he wanted a dir b'tachtenu, desired a dir b'tachtenu, a home, a divine home in the lowest of worlds. If a taiva is instructing kasha, you can ask what's the reason he wanted it? Doesn't matter, there's no reason. Reason was created because he wanted a world where the reason would matter, so he created a world of reason. And in that world of reason, there are many reasons for existence, to reveal the potential, to change the world, and so on. But fundamentally, it's something beyond it. So that's
Something
what
in the
this. So
answer.
notice two things I said now explaining how Ratzon. It's really I have to go back because I'm sure he explains it earlier before. Shteka kachol machshava. You say shtek, be silent. That's how I desire it. So many times when life goes on, you could say, you know what, maybe there's a reason. But then something happens and you realize, hey, 1 second. Life is mysterious. It's not a reason. You see with shidduchim sometimes. You know, you think perfect shidduch and so on. Then you see a shidduch, you don't even know how that happened. So you realize everything is mysterious, even the things you think are reasonable. Because fundamentally it's something deeper than reason. So that and then there's the second thing, that the Ratzon creates reason, not reason creates Ratzon. That's the second element I would say here. I think that's, I mean, again, I would look earlier in the Maimorim, but being that, but he's relying on what he said earlier for sure, because he's referring to it. He's saying, which also is another element here, I should add. Ratzon is not nitfis b'tam. Even if you can find a reason for that desire, you cannot say that desire is defined by or limited to the reason. There's more to the desire than the reason includes. In other words, the reason can explain part of it, but there's something. Ratzon is bigger than reason, basically. So even if there's a reason, I'm not talking about now akshanis. A person
So
just.
Ari is talking
so-
bigger than Atik in a sense.
You're going too far yet. He's not. He's going to get there. One second. But I want to say this. You can. What was I going to say?
He said you're not talking about actions.
Yeah, we're not talking about akshanis. A person. It's also an example. A person's just stubborn. This is what I want, even though the whole thing is illogical. But their pride.
That's chamas.
Yeah, that's chanas. Yeah, that's a different thing. Where a person wants, even though that's sometimes used in Chassidus as an example. That, for example, the example of Tainish Cholam Shabbos. That since your Ratzon is to fast, that becomes your timing, so to speak. So your Ratzon, so-called, creates, even though normally you have a normal person would be gravitate to eat, and that's what his desire, but a Ratzon could be more powerful than Seichel. So even though your Seichel says so and so, you can decide, I don't want to do that.
And that's a different thing. This is
No, but he uses that in other places. Yeah, it's probably a little connected, but bottom line here is the idea that Ratzon, by definition, just like Ratzon does not manifest in a container. See, Seichel is reason. Seichel is not like there's intelligence and then there's reason. Seichel is reason. There's nothing more to Seichel than reason. If it's not reasonable, it's not Seichel. Ratzon is not defined or limited to the reason, even when there is a reason.
Is that
Now you can go even deeper. God, sometimes there are things that we're told that have a reason, like chukim. And there's mishpatim. There's mitzvahs that have api seichel. I think he's going to talk about this. There are mitzvahs that make sense in seichel. Do we do it because of the seichel? No. We do it because God commanded us.
even mishpatim?
Right. They are supposed to be done because...
And the Bashpatim has really no reason.
No, right, correct. And chukim, even though when we find explanations, it's just integrated. But fundamentally, it's because God said, that's what I want. I don't want you to wear shatnez. Go explain it. Now we know, shatnez, chesed, and gvura, you don't mix the two. But why didn't God want chesed and gvura to be mixed? I'm just giving an example. This scenario, that scenario, all the exceptions. So, okay, so it says here, so he continues, it says, there's a reason for the Ratzon, but not that the Ratzon is the level of reason. Well, here he goes. And that's why mitzvahs are fundamentally God's will. We say, right? It's God's will. That's what he wants us to do. Even the mitzvahs that have a reason. Let's say, not to murder or to love another person. Very reasonable, ethical. But ultimately, it's God's will that's the key thing there. Even though there's a reason. Now goes the next step. By the way, this is, what we're reading now is elaborated in the beginning of the Hemshech at length. So you can see clearly he's summing up ideas from it. The fact that he mentioned Perek Mantez Ve'elach right away to me is immediately, you can know right away that Rebbe Rashab is making a reference so many chapters back. Ve'elach, Ba'erech, said at length, that this is like, he's laying out that's why this chapter is one of the waters. I'm going to make a list of the chapters that are the key link chapters, because then they're the ones they're the interfaces in Ayin Beis from one section to the next. So he says like this now. Now the Ratzon, the way it affects us, and the effect of Ratzon and will, desire, and all the faculties is compels them, imposed, it's imposition. Hechech means forces, coerces them. But hechech here is more like an imposition or compels them. Like almost a command.
He's forcing them.
Like a higher force, a higher power. See, that's another sign. Says it again. Like explain that all this above. However, however, the true Reimus, here we go. Listen, we're moving into Atik. The true Reimus of Keser, the true awe or exaltation. How do we translate Reimus? Exalted state.
Elation.
Elation, no, elation is more simcha. You don't mean elation, elevation. Yeah, not elation is
Exaltation is fine.
exaltation is elevation. Reimus, something as Reimus.
Hui.
Gehebenkeit,
Just-
Gehebenkeit. Yeah, it's a Hechigkeit. It's a to find the right word. Okay, there's what. The true Reimus is not in the outer dimension of Kesed. Because that is at least, to some extent, a source for the structure, a source for the cosmic order. Because it has a connection, a relationship with the Ishtalshus. And even though that lower level of Keser, outer Keser, is Rema Musaleim, it's like exalted above them. And not like the hidden wisdom that's a source of revealed wisdom, which is in the form of kiruv, close. Oh, okay, 1 second. Hold on a second. One second here.
He's saying here something.
I thought
new.
chochma stima was Kesher.
Oh,
One second,
yeah.
one second. Let me just get this right. Oh, I see what he's saying. No. Okay. I didn't clarify right. He started out that Reimamus is Kesser. Because chochma is where structure begins. Then from the Ramaz he demonstrated that structure actually begins with chochma stima. So that's not really Reimamus, it's still the structure. So then the Reimamus is higher than chochma stima. But it's still, let's see. Okay, that's the high there. The Reimamus is previous chochma stima, basically. Kesser shebe kesser. Because if chochma stima, see, this is what he's adding. Remember when I said before the channel between the unconscious wisdom and the conscious? So the unconscious wisdom, the outer layer of unconscious wisdom, is close to the conscious wisdom, because they're both on the other side of the curtain, but they're not distant. They're just one step away from the other. It's like the water right before it comes through the faucet. So there's water there, right by the pipe. We're not talking about the water in the reservoir. So that's beginnes kiruv. That's still there. No, 1 second. That's why the chetzein chochma stima is still ishtalshelus, is the structure. So what is reimamus? Is that which is higher than chetzein outer chochma stima? That's kesher shebe kesser.
But he's saying that Arich is higher than chochma stima. That's what he's saying here.
He didn't use the word arich yet.
No, he's talking about.
Now chochma stima is arich. It can no way. There cannot be.
No.
Yeah, there's only atik and arich. There's no new levels there. Listen.
The lowest part of chochma
איזה
stima is Arich.
בבחינת חיצוניוס הכסר. He's talking here about
1 second.
המיתוס או רייממוס.
Hold
שהרי
on.
זה בבחינת סמוקר על כל פנים להשתלשלוס, שיש לזה שייכוס על ההשתלשלוס. He's talking here about חיצוניוס הכסר.
Chetzein kesser is arich.
is אריך. ואם יוישו הוא בבחינת רייממוס עליהם, ולא כמו חוכמה סתימו או מוקר החוכמה הגלויו. So he's saying here clearly.
No. Let's see. The way this is the way it is. Kesser is made up of atik and arich. Arich in general is chetzein kesser. Atik is primus kesser. That's in general. In arich there's 10 spheres. Chochma of Arich is Chochma Stima. But there's Keser in Arich. Keser of Arich is Keser Shebekesser. It's still
There are 10
Chetzenis.
spheres in Arich.
Yeah. And there's a Keser in Arich also.
There's a Kesser, the same thing in Arich.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing here. So he's saying is that the Rememus, what he's saying here is that the Rememus, since the Ramah says that Chochma Stima is part of structure, so what's Rememus? That which is above Chochma Stima, which is Arich, Keser of Arich. That's how. Now he's going deeper and saying it's even more than that. You understand? That's what he's saying here. Let me read it. I'm more sure that's what he's saying, but I want to read it inside. Let's just go here. Now, even the part that's higher than Chochma Stima. Because Chetzenis HaKesser, at the end of the day, even Arich, even the highest part of Arich is still a source for existence. Even though Bechinas Reimamus Olim, meaning the Keser of Arich, even though the Keser of Arich is still the Reimamus, is higher than. Because Chochma Stima of Arich is a source and a form of closeness to revealed wisdom. Still, you cannot call it essential exaltation.
It's not right.
It's only relative. One second. One second. Let's just finish this. That's only that it's exalted relative to the emanations. This is a higher state. That's why Keser, and you'll see this is Arich. That's why Keser is counted in the 10 spheres. Let me explain what that means. It says in Arizal writes like this, that sometimes when a Keser Nimna, when you count Keser, you don't count Das. When you count Das, you don't count Keser. And the explanation given is, when you count from the level of Chetzenis HaKeser, then you count Keser, and you don't count Das, because Das is a primis dika thing. When you count the primis of the spheres, you count Das, you don't count Keser, because primis HaKeser is higher than the spheres. We see from that Chetzenis HaKeser is part of the spheres structure. So even though in Keser itself, excuse me,
Das is only a Pneumius thing.
generally, yeah. So we see from that
That sounds very right. He
What?
doesn't say it here, but it sounds
Yeah.
right.
But basically you're saying that Chetzenis HaKeser, therefore, even though it's compared, Reimamus compared to, in Chetzenis HaKeser Gufa, Chochma Stima is saying is close, not Reimamus, is part of the structure. Keser Sheba Arich, or Keser Sheba Chetzenis HaKeser, is Reimamus, but it's only Reimamus that's relative. Now he's going to say, what is essential, real Reimamus? Since it's counted, you can't call it Reimamus. Reimamus refers to something that's beyond. The true beyond is inner Keser, the inner crown, which is never counted, is not at all not counted in the 10 spheres, in the spheres. It's completely separate from them. That's the level of Atik, which means Atik means removed from, Hataka removed from, Shenetek v'nivla, it's removed and separate completely from the emanations. Now remember, there was a whole piece where we learned, which was also a critical piece, that when he asked the question, that Rizal says the interface is Keser. Atik represents the divine, Arich represents the existence. So the Rebbe Rashab asked, how do they meet? Atik is always the divine. Arich is always the beginning of existence. Where's the meeting? So he says Chochma Stima is the meeting place. Because Chochma Stima is connected to Atik, it brings down from Atik, and it's the beginning of Chochma. So now if you add this to the equation, Chochma Stima is really more like the structure. But it's not like Chochma Gluya, it's ultimately unconscious. So it's much closer to existence, but it has a channel to Pnimis Chochma Stima, which already leads you into Atik. So basically, what he's saying now is that Reimamus is actually that which is beyond existence. In the interface, we want the Reimamus of Atik to be part of our reality. That still needs to be explained exactly how that happens, but he's getting there. So
Where's the Pneumius of Arik fit in?
the premise of Arich
Yeah, it's mental.
is
The
keser of
keser.
Arich.
Okay.
Not no keser.
I mean, Ketzer. Yeah.
Keser of Arich would be basically Chetzenis Keser has two levels itself. Premise and Chetzenis. Chochmas Tema and down are Chetzenis.
Mhm.
There's no, sorry, there's a Chetzenis of Chochmas Tema, and that's close to existence. It's like right one step before revealed.
That's a chochma.
It's like the step before conscious wisdom, and then there's the other direction. The Keser above Chochmas Tema is what he calls Remimus, meaning it's exalted, but it's only.
How is that different from Atik?
No, but this is not
Because
Remimus.
Atik is
That's
fundamentally exalted. This is
How it
relative.
is connected to Atik?
Atik is always beyond. That's just relatively relative. That's what he's saying. It's not. It's relative because at the end of the day, Chetzenis Keser Arich is counted in the spheres. You don't count when you don't count das. You count that. So at the end of the day, it's part of the structure. What he's saying is in this. Let's put this. Hold on one second. In the structure itself, you have to understand because of the interface. I'll give you an example. You can have a sense of awe in the middle of the day, some type of some experience. But then there are times where you have a sense of awe that's beyond even the regular sense of awe. So there's really two stages, two ways of experiencing beyond. One is more relative to your state of existence, and one is completely fundamentally different. What he's saying, one is still within your structure. It'd be basically how blown away we'd really be. That's what it comes down to. One is completely a different level, and one is beyond me, but it's more relative to our containers. I mean, I have to find examples for it, but that's what he's saying here. He's not giving examples. Just
And how is that different from another interface between Atik and Arik? How is that compared to Chochma Tzuma with the interface? And you can say Keser is also an interface.
No. Chochmas Tema is the level of is in Keser. Chochmas Tema is the chochma of Arich of Keser.
Right.
You really break it down, it comes down to there's two parts in Keser. Then there's two parts in each of the two parts.
It's an interface with an interface.
Yeah. That it's always the process.
Yeah.
Remember, this is where it all. You mess up here. This is
But
where.
the chochma Tema is not connected directly to Atik. Because
Here he doesn't say that, but he
there is
says
the
that
Keser.
earlier. He does say that earlier. See, the unconscious mind. Remember, primis
goes
primis
through the
abba,
Keser.
primis atik. Yeah. There's two sides to it. There's one side that's close to chochma gluya, but let's be honest, it's still unconscious. So in some way, it's very similar to the deeper levels of unconscious. It all depends on how you're speaking here. Remember, it's layers. Atik is as close as it gets to the essence of the person, but it's still keser. It's still not the essence. It is keser. Atik is also keser at the end of the day.
Ah.
Atik is removed completely, but it's removed. It's one step from the essence. The essence doesn't have anything.
Doesn't
The essence
touch-
is not interested in anything.
How is
doesn't
Atik
touch the
connected to
essence. Doesn't
chochma?
touch the
It-
essence.
Well, Atik, for practical purposes, Atik is as close to the essence that we relate to right now.
Okay.
Let's not talk about Atzmus
Okay.
right now.
So he doesn't make it. Does he later on make an interface between Atik and
That for sure.
and Atmos?
Later, earlier, yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's all covered for sure.
How is Atik
But
connected?
but it's
to
not going there
chochma
right now. For all practical purposes, Atik is Etzem.
To chochma Tema, how is Atik connected to chochma Tema?
There's a long memorim about this. There's a whole long memorim about this. Because primis abba, primis atik. Chochma is right away connected to Atik. Even chochma gluya is connected to Atik. Because primis chochma, primis abba, primis atik. That's what it says. Right now, he's not talking about that
Okay.
part. Because there's another part. Chochma really is Atik, manifesting in seichel, in wisdom. That's why wisdom brings pleasure. But it's just not saying it, but just for the record, I can tell you which memorim it is.
It's okay.
There's a whole discussion on this.
The way that I understand is that every chochma must have a keser because this is like the source of the chochma. So the chochma Tema must have its keser, which is the keser of Arich, in order to be connected to the Atik. It's not going directly to the chochma Tema.
I don't know if I would phrase it exactly like
You
that.
know what you're bothered with? Because on the charts, Chochma is always lower than
It is
the
because chochma cannot exist without keser. This
But
is
it's
the
a
That's a
reality.
whole different way of looking at those.
No, but one second. When you talk of the 10 spheres, you go chochma to malchus. Above that, there's a crown. The crown itself has spheres in it. There's 10 spheres in Attic and 10 spheres in Attic. In Arich. Just remember that. That's why it works.
So it's chochma of Arik and Attic that we're talking about. It's chochma to
Exactly. Yeah.
How is
But
das?
Attic is also having 10 spheres.
Yeah. It's go early in the Hemshel. There's a whole chapter on that.
Atmos is also having 10 spheres.
No, not Atmos. Never
noticed in the beginning.
That's not
talking
Atmos.
about
That's
it.
Ayin Sof Lifnei. Atmos, there's no spheres. There's no nothing in Atmos.
Okay.
Atmos is a whole different world. As I said, we can't even figure out an apple in
So
Tzir Luchnis.
we're not talking about Atmos Bechlau. We're talking about
In
Or Sof.
Teira Shalom B'Chlal, you say you can't talk about Atmos. As soon as you talk about it, you're ready. But you look, you could get a grasp for it when you start realizing you don't get it. That's when you start getting it. That's the key thing. You stop looking, that's when it starts emerging. You look, it disappears. That's how it is. Bittel. No, that's what it says. What does it mean? You don't give secrets to the Torah except one's ready to die for it. What does it mean to die? It means unless you give up your mitzvahs, that's when you get the secrets. It doesn't work on the other way. It's the classic, the Rebbe brings, the mitzvahs of shikha. It's a mitzvah only when you forget it, not when you try to remember. Kol habarech that Alter Rebbe brings in L'Kutei Torah. You run away from honor, it pursues you. As soon as you look for it, or you're running and looking over your shoulder if it's chasing you, it pursues. It eludes you. The example I remember as a child, we always loved. I don't know if you remember. As a child, I was always extremely intrigued by mercury. Used to break open thermometers. Today they don't have them anymore,
Thank God.
And mercury. But mercury is a substance that you see. You try to touch it, it pops out from under your finger. You can't grab it, but it's extremely intriguing. I know it's dangerous, whatever. I'm just telling you. But as a child, this is the reason I have some brain damage.
More from your dentist.
Anyway, but I'm forget about the negative. The mercury was a property that mercury is it's like water, but it's not water. It's like very cool. You could break it into many parts, and then they all come together like one. It's very interesting properties. And that magnets, children like magnets, because there's the weird rules of how they work. They show you there's something more going on. By magnets, they're repelling and attracting. The point I'm making here is that there are things I heard from somebody when they take silkworm out of silkworm. The art of getting silk out of a silkworm is a tremendous art. But you know what the key to the art is? You have to go with extreme patience. The tendency is you want to pull hard. As soon as you pull, it tears. It won't come out. You have to learn the art of extreme
Catching it.
not just catching it. I can't explain it. It's slow. It's like slowly, and it's an art of that much. It's counterintuitive, because the first thing you want to do is you want to schlep it out. It's like an art of almost not pulling and pulling. Moti v'lo moti. It's like pulling and not pulling at the same time. It's really the art also of real communication. You're really speaking to someone that's making you crazy because it's just going too slow. You have to learn how to really, work with it on their level. It's the art of restraint. That's what it is. Yeah, exactly. It's the art of restraint, which is for people who have a lot of energy. Restraint is not easy.
Atmos.
Yeah.
The Rebbe Rashab said
You have to be very secure to have restraint.
He's saying Yedativ Yisif.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what all the,
Okay, so let's
I have a
continue.
question. Can I ask a question, please? How can
It
Das?
depends. We have to ask the committee here.
All right.
We'll let him ask the question.
How can Das be more Panini than Chochma?
It's really not relevant to this mimer. I mentioned it, but it
Because
doesn't
it's
say
not
it here.
counted when it's not counted.
Yeah, I mention, but the truth is it's a complete tangent, and I prefer not to go into it right now because it's not a 2-minute explanation. Right, exactly. That's technical. Das is a kava pnimi. Chesed is right. Chochma is right. Bim is left.
Okay, where should I read it? Can't explain it. Experiential.
Tofre Samachei from the Rebbe Rashab. He talks about this whole thing. The
these
two ways of
concepts
counting.
that we'll see.
The two counting of counting of When you count the previous of spheres, you count das. You count the chitzenius. Remember also, das is intimacy. Intimacy, there's no chitzenius intimacy. Either you're intimate or you're not. See, chochma, you could have an external understanding, a deeper understanding. Das Adam Yoda Chava, it's either they're intimate or they're not intimate. I'm not talking about today's world, what they call it. I'm talking about real intimacy. Intimacy is fundamentally a primistic thing. And so that's the way it should be. So that's generally the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, chapter, the third chapter, das is iskashus.
Being intimate,
Iskashus is iskashus. You cannot. There's no such thing as chachenidik iskashus. Either you're connected, or you're not connected. Even though you will find sometimes it says chacheni is das and primi is das, but that's in primis itself. Like always, there's always levels. But das generally is a primistic experience. What's the difference between chochma bin and das? Really? Chochma is a spark of idea. Das is you understand the whole thing. What does das add? So sometimes it says iskashus. You get connected to the idea. Sometimes it says it's the ha moment. Sometimes it's hakara, recognition, hargosha, you feel it. All these are terms used on das. Das is really like not just the conclusion of a brilliant idea, but an internalization which becomes one with you. That oneness is primis. That's the whole meaning of das. Chachenius, you could have bina still.
And it's higher than the thing it connects, things that it connects.
You say, Mola Oruz Deis Hashem, Kamayim Le'yom Mechasim. Das. The world will be filled with divine knowledge. Das. Like what? Like water fills the sea. Which means complete like a fish in sea. A fish can't be half out of the sea, half in the sea. You're in or you're out.
And you're part of the sea.
Right. You're part. You're one with it. You become the experience. That's really what das is. You become. You don't just know that you experience it, which is why Eitz Das, not Eitz Chochma, Eitz Bina, because it was about. They knew that they were good and evil. They were smart people. They understood there were two choices, but they didn't taste it. Once you experience it, it's not the same as reading about it. Once
you're not a spectator.
No, what? Yeah, now you've already gone over. Now you have tasted from the forbidden tree, for the forbidden fruit. It's a new world.
It'll be the same anymore.
Right, exactly. Because the illusion that people have is, you know what? I know all about it. I read about it. I saw. I witnessed. So what's the big thing? I'll try it once. You try. You're now a new club. You're in a new club. Now you're ready. Now you're it. You're no longer watching it. Now you're part of the problem. Yeah, that's how it is. First time someone tastes sin. It's a sad moment in life. Loss of innocence.
Right. That's in the Lomas, but it's also the Kedusha.
Of course, yeah, that's the Kedusha, of course. Okay.
Thank you. That got it. I think it.
Okay, good. I ended up explaining it anyway. Fine.
Right.
No, I have a taiva to explain these things. Don't get me wrong. I need restraint not to explain it all, because it's not, it's like
It's not really relevant to here.
everything is relevant. Everything is relevant. Okay, so there we go.
It's 101.
So go now. The Mitzvah Sarem was the true beyond, the beyond of the beyond. Not just beyond you, beyond your
I
beyond.
think salvation is really the right word.
Actually, I like beyond, to be honest, because it captures very much what Remus really means. It's a sense of something beyond. Remus literally means the Remus of haMelech, the exaltation. Elevation is aliyah.
Beyond doesn't mean it's a positive thing.
Whatever level it is, it's always
Aromemcho is always a positive thing.
Look, we all know they're not going to find an exact English word for this.
Exaltation.
They all
is
capture different.
You have English to there?
I have it in English, yeah, but
It
means it's exaltedness. It's the same thing.
it's in the shelf there below. If you look. Anyway, let's continue here. Let's move this in a second. Okay, it's good. So the real is atik, because lashon atok is shenetik v'nivdel legam min hatzalem, because it's removed, separate completely from the emanations down there, under the shasta. Emanations. Liya she'atik ze'abchins atzmus ein seif, being that atik is atzmus ein seif, is the essence of the infinite. Shemerumam umenusim etzad atzmei, that is exalted Elevated, let's say, menusa. Menusa, I would say, is more elevated. Merumim is exalted, menusa elevated on its own. haMelech
Yeah.
hamerimim levade.
Exaltation.
I know the translation of the exaltation. That doesn't mean anything. The question is, look, when we use English, when we use any language, we're trying to make it intimate to us. Words mean nothing. If the word exaltation doesn't elicit anything in you, then you don't use the word. We're not get trapped in words here. So you have to find the right word. You just keep playing until you get the word. I'm a writer. It's what you do. We're trying to explain in general invisible concepts. So there's really words are not always adequate. I work with a great designer named Batsheva. She works. Since I'm working with her, it changed my whole way of writing because I can rely on sometimes on an image she's going to create that I don't need to find the word. Sometimes an image captures or an idiom captures something. That's why a full experience you're never going to find purely in words. There's some things you just can't convey in words. Yeah, if you really work at it, you can convey, you can express even the inexpressible. But ultimately, this is a lot of inexpressible concepts. Yeah. So I'm just trying to say it's not about being trapped by the word. Whatever word you use, I don't care if there's 20 words to explain Meruma. To me, beyond works, transcendence works a little. Even though I wouldn't say it's a literal translation of Meruma. If I translated this literally, I probably would not use necessarily transcendence. But it's definitely more correct in the content of it than the word. And English ultimately is only a language. All it is it's words. And some words work, some words don't work. Keser, crown. What is it? Most people crown. What is a crown? The crown's on the king's head. It's a word, it's translation. But he says in the beginning of the Hemshel, there are three meanings in Keser. One is silence, removal. There's the Keser. The real meaning of Keser as a crown really means that it surrounds, that it's above. That's really the meaning. It's a metaphor. Crown is a metaphor. I'm just saying it's important to know the limitations of language, and then you can use it properly.
I have to leave now, and I'm very sorry for myself. Could you tell me in one word about verb? Yes or no? No explaining. Yes or no?
There's a reason I'm not saying anything.
I know.
What word? What word did you say? You translated? What word?
Everything we say here is heard everywhere. Remember.
Okay.
Call me and I'll tell you.
What word about what?
I'll tell you. I'll tell you exactly.
You know my number, right?
It's on softness?
Yeah. So okay, so this one is question. haMelech hamerimim levade. So he's using this verse to say haMelech hamerimim levade. The king that he's merimim levade would mean he's alone in his exaltation, but it also means merimim levade on his own. On his own. Merimim levade. He doesn't need something else to be exalted from, meaning above it. He fundamentally is above it all, beyond it all. That's the difference. So, if you remember, we learned this also in Torah. We learned about two types of chacham. There's a wise person who's wise relative to the people he's with. He's smarter than they are. Then there are people who fundamentally are just in a different level. It's not relative necessarily who they're with. They just have it's a different level. That's it, on its own. How do you pronounce it? Aromemcho? Aromemcho or memcho? Memcho. Aromemcho. That's wrong. Aromemcho. Huh? That's the puzzle. He's using Aromemcho Elokei haMelech. Where does that say? Is that a puzzle? Huh? But where's the pasuk? It's telling. What capital does it say there? Aromemcho Elokei haMelech. The other pasuk was Yeshaya, Chafei. Okay. So it goes like this. Well, the fizet sarach leimer ma'o'in aromemcho. Kuf mem hey, right? Kuf mem hey. What does it say? What pasuk?
Yeah, Aleph.
Oh, kuf. It's pasuk Aleph. Because Ashi is a combination of several. So kuf mem hey Aleph. Okay. So it goes like this. So according to this, what is aromemcho Elokei haMelech? What is aromemcho? The mashmel l'reim l'agbil l'maylim. No. Here's a question. I'm sorry, not tzarech lemer. L'fizet tzarech lahavin. According to this, that aromemcho is the highest remus. Fundamentally, so what does it mean aromemcho? The mashma, aromemcho means the mashma. It's an active word. That I will exalt, I will lift you up. The mashmal l'reimim will hagbiya l'mayla. That means that you will lift up, you will remain him, you will exalt and lift up above. Since now we're talking that it's Rum and Be'etzem, where can you lift it higher? How can Atik be lifted higher than Atik? Arich can be lifted. The first interpretation where you say it's Reimamus, you could say, okay, Arich is Arich, it's relative, and you're lifting Arich into Atik. Who begins haMelech? HaKadosh Muvdal Be'etzem. This is the level of haMelech HaKadosh, meaning, you say the king, the holy king, what is Kadosh? What means holy? There's Kadosh. Kadosh comes from the word Muvdal, separate from. That he's holy and separate from, fundamentally, Kadosh and Muvdal. He's fundamentally and essentially higher than and separate from everything. Is Mashayach B'zel L'Reima made? How can we lift this higher? The answer is, however, the answer is, the Pirush aromemcho l'hamshich b'chinas hareimamus. It means to draw down, not to lift it up. To draw down this reimamus. Alefcha chochma. If you remember, we learned about Aleph. Alefcha chochma means a chochma teaches, bina. Alefcha is a teacher. Alefcha chochma says Alefcha chochma, Alefcha bina. Alefcha chochma, that chochma becomes a teacher in Aleph. Alefcha. How's the literal translation of Alefcha chochma? That it's like an aluf, right? The chochma is an aluf, which is really like also exalted. Aluf is a sar. What is it? A prince, a minister, huh? A duke, a lord. Alef is aluf. Alef chochma, alef bina.
Okay, so
but then there's the act. So he's also the same thing. So alef chochma begins as being alef from the word aluf. Maybe aluf. Maybe that's the word Raymond. He's like aloof on his own, but in a good way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, Alefcha Chochma, however, is that you're drawing it down. And this is by the way, where you see he's comparing it. You can say he's comparing it similar to the verse that he said when we spoke about Aleph Bina. About Eitzes. What was the lesson there? Aleph. Yeah. Hashem Elokei aromemcho, Eidashimcha Kiasisa Pella. So Pella, there was Pella Aleph, yeah. So also Elokei aromemcho. Here the verse is Elokei aromemcho, Elokei haMelech.
Saying these great praises, it brings it down.
Yeah. But b'chinas reimus ha'atzmus, yeh b'chinas hamshacha v'gili. That the reimus ha'atzmus, the fundamental, the exaltation, the beyond of atzmus, should be in a form of being transmitted and revealed.
So by praising Atmos, you bring it to Hamshacha.
That's what he's answering here. Let's read. And this is the long chaf. Aromemcho ends with a chaf seifis, which is the long, the long chaf. It's called whatever this chaf safit. This is the final chaf. At the end of a word, you whenever the word ends, like a mem is the shlosh mem, which is the box. Chaf, tzadik, pei, these 5 letters that have 2 letters within them each. So there's chaf, there's mem, there's pei, tzadik, and tov. Tov? And shem also. No. There's 4, right? What is it? Chaf, mem, pei, and tzadik. Nun. Those 5. Nun. The 5. There's 5 that repeat by Geula. When they say Geula, it repeats in both. It's it's like
Mem.
Mem has a shlosh mem. It's not a mem, so that's not a long mem.
Yeah.
The others are long.
So the
At the end of a word, Ashalom Aleichem, so it's a shlosh mem.
Yeah, but Shloshman doesn't have the long.
It doesn't have a long, but it's considered. But it's the 2 mems. One that's in the middle of a word.
It's also Hamshacha.
Yeah, but not here. He's not talking about that. Here's what's it. So safe tables. He's talking about the chaf. Shehu loshen nechach. This is loshen nechach. This means the present nechach, that he's present. The loshen.
We're talking directly to
The first person.
singular.
But also but nechach. That's why nechach is called nechach, to be present, because it means you're
Directly.
yeah.
Directly in front of it doesn't mean you.
Yeah, it means you as opposed to one. Like one would say, you say you. Yeah. Tevis aromemcho sheloshen nechach. The chaf makes it loshen nechach. Aromemcho. Okay, yeah. Aromemcho. I will exalt you. Right. Loshen nechach. Shemed al izgalus, which means, which suggests, that it shows on that it's revealed, that it's there. That's revealing. Right. Loshen nista would be he, who. Like you'd say, Aromem Elokim, or something like that. Aromemcho.
I will.
Lifts, yeah. Here, aromemcho, you. So this refers to being revealed. He's proving that it's revealed. So how could you say nechach? How could you speak to you? The whole idea of rememus, exaltation, is that it's concealed and hidden and concealed. Because the purpose here is that it should be actually to draw down and to transmit this exaltation should be revealed.
Isn't that a contradiction? If something, how can you hamshach v'gili of something which is beyond revelation?
That's the whole. This is what
So
we're
you put
learning.
your effort to it.
3 volumes of Ayin Beis is to teach us that. Yes, how we in our defined existence can experience transcendence, which is beyond existence.
It's partially hamshach, and it's partially that we lift ourselves. That's what it seems to say now in this last sentence.
One second. V'gam aromemcho mamat l'mayla.
Not in the mala.
Hold on. Elokei al masha kosuv achakach Elokei haMelech. He's giving now another interpretation. This was Mamayla Lamata.
Before it was mala mata, now it's in the mata.
Yeah. Mamayla Lamata means that here Rememus means not Rememus that you're going up to the place, because here there's nowhere to go up. Atik is already on top, so how could you lift it higher? So it means bringing it down. Now he says, this interpretation is that shouldn't be read. I am exalting you, lifting you to a better place. It's Elokei haMelech. So how does that work? So here's going this becomes the whole explanation what Elokei haMelech is. There's going to be pages of Koyach and Poyel and Gilia, Helen, and all that. Yesh Ma'ayin. So how does he explain it? That it goes, that remember referring to the end of the next words. It's not talking about aromemcho, I will lift you atik, to a higher level, saying I will lift Elokei haMelech to remus atzmus, to this essential, fundamental, beyond.
We have to thank God that we can have a relation to
exactly.
it, so we can.
So in other words, it does mean remus.
What's the whole purpose of it? I don't understand. The whole purpose of, if you're taking God, that we have some shaykhs with to make God into a level we have no shaykhs with. What does this mean?
No, I
It's
would say the exact
Elokei-
opposite.
It's bringing Elokei up to a
It's bringing us. 1 second.
It's bringing us now. Okay.
1 second. No. It's bringing. First of all, it's connecting us to God. Now, our connection to God is on the lower level, to Elokei haMelech. And I remember saying, I will lift my connection to this level of Elokei haMelech to that. So it goes like this. And by Rim, when you lift this level of Elokei haMelech, my God, the King, through this you draw the Remus Atzmus, the higher state of Atzmus, into Elokei haMelech. Think of it like lifting chochmas Tema, Geluya into chochmas Tema into Atik, and by doing that you bring Atik into Arich. That's the point.
Merging them.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is hard work. It doesn't.
Oh.
Va'inyan hu, and now he begins. So you see here already how he's taking everything we learned before and starting a new dimension of. Some who've learned Ayin Beis in depth told me that this second book, which this is the end of the first volume almost, and then comes to that, is not as complex subjects, but much deeper in the subject itself. We'll wait and see. I want to see that myself. But in other words, the question really I have is, what's missing that we need to now continue? That he said to understand all this, we need to go further. That means all this was not enough in the interface. I mean, from my point of view, there's plenty to work with there. So clearly the Rebbe Rashab's standard is higher than that. But it's important to understand what's really being contributed here. I mean, I'm not going to speculate yet, but you see from this that he's now getting much more nitty gritty. Once he's established, I think you could say till here he's established the dynamics. Here's structure, Eris and Kalim. Here's Keser. Here's the interfaces.
Oh, please.
The interfaces.
I remember from.
There's interfaces.
No.
So he goes like this now. The meaning of Elokei, my God, Elokei, aromemcho, Elokei haMelech. Elokei, it means, however, mine, right? Also personal, not just Elokim.
My God.
My God, my God. Aromemcho, Elokei haMelech. I will lift you or exalt you, my God, the King. So Elokei is Loshen Keach. The Loshen Ayolei Haaretz. Ayolei Haaretz. What is the meaning of Ayolei Haaretz? Eli is like the ayel, the animal that's the powerful. But Elokei, how is Elokei?
He's just playing on the root of the word.
Ele, it's from the word Ele. Okay, power. Shezeh Omer David HaMelech Olav HaShalom Ba'avur Klolos HaElam. This is what David HaMelech said on behalf of the entire world. Shaker v'achayis hanimshich lehem erin sei baruch hu. That the strength, you could say the power, the force, and the life force and the life energy that is extends into them, is transmitted to them from the infinite divine light of God, in order to create and to sustain them, haMelech comes from the level of the king, Malchus. Being that he's a king of the entire universe, that's what gives them life and sustenance. And created from nothing. That comes from this Malchus. So when David HaMelech is saying, aromemcho, Elokei haMelech, he's referring to a Keach, the Keach of the Keach Elokei, the divine force that gives existence, that sustains, that creates and sustains it. You can do it. The Kolsi b'sasavs elements from Pnei Sha'ala b'Ritzeinei, and not haMelech. It's known the whole reason for existence, for the creation of existence, is because it arose in his desire and his will. And not haMelech. I want to rule. And there's no king without a nation. The levels that are higher than Malchus are not a source for the worlds. And they're not a cause to the creation of the worlds. It's in the level of Malchus that God has a relationship with existence. The level where he wants to be related to something, where a king wants a nation. That's what makes the connection. So it's interesting. So when we say Kesed is the will that create that the interface, that the essence wants something, so really it's Kesed Malchus. So Kesed, right, exactly. Right, exactly. So Kesed Malchus is all connected to this. This is the Malchus part.
Is this synonymous with Dir B'Tachtonim?
Yeah, but doesn't use that word because here the focus is on God, that the God being the king of the universe, the captain.
You're talking Malchus of Atzilus, but no.
He was talking Malchus of Ein Sof Pashtus. Malchus in the way it's the not haMelech, the Ratzon no haMelech, which is the essence. The Madreg Shal Malchus is okay. Chochma Bina had Alpaim Shana Kadmei Teira Le'elam. Chochma and Bina, for example, which are far higher than Alpaim Shana Kadmei Teira Le'elam. They precede the world. It doesn't mean time. It says 2,000 years they precede. Teira precedes the world. She'enam b'chinas makir. That's what it means. It means in concept, Teira, which is Chochma and Bina, are above existence. We say in the Bar Mitzvah Maimer, and you need Midas. He brings the proof. He brings the Avraham Avinu that to do Chesed you need somebody. The chochma bin, you don't need anyone. You could just sit and contemplate. But in chesed gvura gutzav, the real connection to others is malchus. It's the end of the midas.
No, what's that? Alpine Sham Kabuter Lane. It's chochma bina.
Apayim is chochma bin. Alef chochma, alef bina. Yeah.
And that is also Lashon Elef, 1,000.
Yeah, right. That's a pirush. Apayim is al chochma, alef bina. Correct. She'enim chinas mokiv. V'gam enim siba elisavus. I mean, I know he doesn't spell it out, but it was clear. And they're also, besides, he keeps saying, they're not just a mocker, they're also not the reason to become a mocker, for creation. They're not a cause, a reason for Yisavas. From the perspective of chochma and bina, from intellect, wisdom and understanding, the world doesn't have to exist. From malchus, the world must exist, or else there's no malchus. From the perspective of chochma and bina, you could have Torah, it's God's wisdom, and that's it. Like an example from a person below. Seichel does not necessitate another. You can sit alone and contemplate pontificate and what I wanted to say, not pontificate, and ruminate. Haskalas, ideas.
Haskalas in and of themselves have something else, aren't they?
Or beyond another. Seichel does not necessitate another.
To communicate, say.
No, in general.
It's in and of itself.
You can sit and think and contemplate something. You don't need anyone.
That's already machshava.
But what are you thinking about? You're thinking about.
No, but seichel, then even seichel is even more than machshava.
Yeah, but how do you use seichel without machshava?
It doesn't matter. The point is seichel. The idea of seichel does not need. Seichel has its own value.
The content.
Content of the seichel does not need another.
Obviously.
Yeah. So remember, you're talking
we
from
can't
below
relate-
up. If you're in the level of seichel,
We still can't relate to what seichel is itself. We can't even
What's your
without bringing it to
You're
machshava.
saying it even more.
Well, without
Level of
machshava,
seichel,
right.
You don't need anybody else.
exactly.
100%. We
Exactly.
still can't relate to that without.
It's correct. We can't
Yeah.
talk about anything without machshava or dibur.
No. Without the machshava of seichel.
What's your question?
Seichel is not. Seichel in and of itself is not us.
That's not what he's saying. That's nothing to do with us. Seichel does not need your seichel. You can sit. A person is saying an example. A person can sit and ruminate ideas. Doesn't need another person. There's no need. It's not necessary. That's all he's saying.
But if he's ruminating ideas, he's still doing it at the level of machshava.
But it doesn't matter. It's not relevant to the point. That point is that seichel.
It's not pure seichel. That's what I'm saying. If you're
So
ruminating
what?
ideas.
So what?
Unconscious.
And seichel up here is needs others.
Pure seichel.
Seichel need this machshava do it. So the level of seichel definitely you don't need anybody else.
But kamay kein b'chinas chochma bina l'mayla. The same thing is with chochma bina above. Like this example, sheshayachim gam k'shlo yisavas elements, that they're capable. Chochma bina vatzilas do not need bri yitzira asiyah. Chochma bina in its level on its own does not need. Malchus cannot be without something else. It requires another entity because it's defined by that. Ein melech b'lo yam. V'ayim is borel il, and look what he and delve into what he said earlier about prokim mem vov, mem zayin, and mem ches. And look earlier chapters 46, 47, and 48. He has that in the parentheses.
Why is it parenthetical? Sometimes there are some
There's no rule. It's sometimes no real rule. Ayim Mashal is borel il would always usually be parenthetical when he says Ayim Mashal is borel il. When something he's talking about, he just says, I discussed it earlier. He's giving you almost like a footnote. V'amidus hagam sheshiyachem el azulis. And emotions, even though they are connected to another, to feel. Like, for example, you can't do good, kindness just to yourself, with yourself. Like with another. Only with another. So the keter we see here, not just malchus, but also midas, also seem to connect another. So besides the fact, he's answering, that there are what's called midas atzmin, fundamental emotions, that have no connection to another. Like it says elsewhere. In parentheses, he's qualifying another thoroughness. Also, melucha, just for the record, they're things that have no connection to another. haMelech b'terem kol yitzu nivra. Melech b'terem kol yitzu nivra, meaning he was a king b'terem kol before anything existed, before anything was shaped. But that he speaks also in the beginning of the Hemshech. He talks about that's how Malchus is within the etzem of the divine, it's just his level. So there is Malchus on that is beyond connection. But let's go on. So in addition to that, there's midas that are just fundamentally not connected to another. The transmission of feelings is not necessary. It has to be specifically to someone who's completely outside of you, completely other than you. Someone that's separate and apart from you. Because you could transmit feelings to children, sons, craving relatives, and people who you truly love, your true beloved.
And that's the Chatzonius part of it, of the Keli.
Yeah, it's not atzmin. He's saying even regular midas that you do transmit, doesn't necessitate someone that's completely apart from you. He's going to say malchus that does. But kingship that is not capable on sons, on children. Only on servants. People who are not your family. Say you're king of your family. Sorry to burst your bubbles.
You want your wife to treat you like a king, or your children?
Yeah, she should treat you like a king, but like they say, that the chassan's dem melech is like a king, as long as he treats his wife like a queen, he remains a king. That's important.
Steps in line.
The example of this above. What's the example of this king? Look, in other words, a ruler over a king means he's a ruler over people that are not his family. That's the point. That makes him a king. So he says, the example of this above, the madrega shalamaylam b'chinas hamalchus, so was an example, is that the levels that are higher than malchus, lo yahu yisavas el b'chinas yesh mitzias. From the levels that are higher than malchus, could not have been the creation of existence of the worlds in a form of yesh and mitzias, meaning a separate identity and entity and ego and a dependent entity. Generally, yesh is usually more. Mitzias is an existence, and yesh is a sense of your existence, like that you're conscious of it.
Which is more grub?
Yesh is more grub. You say mitzias, yesh, chemer, gas, like that. Those are. Bitl hayesh is not bitl mitzias. Bitl hayesh means your ego, your identity has been subjugated. That's the whole thing he spoke earlier. Introduces bitl mitzias, that there's nothing but God, and you're just completely bottled to that, extension of that. So, in order for there to be creation of the worlds, yesh, in the form of that they are an identity of substance. Yesh could also mean substance. Yesh, there's something. Yesh, mashu. There's something there. Yesh. In order for the creation of the world, that's yesh. That comes specifically, explicitly from malchus. The inyan yeshus ha'elam ena kavana rak ba'elam is biyah. And when we speak here about yeshus ha'elam, the identity of existence of the world, the kavana, the intention is not just the worlds of bri, yitzir, and asiya. Shagam b'chinas ak nikra adam debriya, because also ak adam kadman, the first of all worlds, is called adam debriya in general. It's the world of creation in the general term. Everything that was formed and created after the tzimtzum, after the big bang, the big dark hole, the black hole that concealed everything, is yeshem mitzias. Is already is a yeshem mitzias. It's being, an entity. It's going even deeper now. Wow. And from the levels that are higher than Malchus, there wouldn't have been a tzimtzum. because you don't need anything else. Everything would have been on the level of the infinite divine light before the tzimtzum. And here he adds, Bechinas Atzilus the Klolos. Remember I said the one earlier class, this is Atzilus the Klolos is Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum.
That's the higher Atzilus he's talking about.
Yeah. The general, we say the Atzilus that encompasses everything. Then there's in the worlds themselves, it's the hologram. Everything is like two. And only because it arose in his desire, his blessed desire. I want to rule, I want to rule. So
he only has the ideas.
Which is only possible on those that are separate from him. Like you said, not children, but it has to be someone separate. Independent entities. Because of this, one second, was the tzimtzum that creates the creations in a form of Yeshem Mitzias, Mislabish Behem, and what manifests in them? Elokei, an energy and life force, the divine energy and life force, aromemcho, which is only a diminished reflection, to give them life, to give them constant life, to sustain them constantly, continuously, constantly. Like we say, that God is constantly renewing perpetual creation in His goodness, in His kindness, creation. This is the energy, the force that is continuously renewed, from the source, that travels through the filter, the concealment of the tzimtzum. 1 second. And that's Elokei haMelech. That's the level of Elokei haMelech, which is, he didn't yet conclude. But this is going to be take Elokei haMelech, and he wants that to be aromemcho, to elevate that into that which is beyond. So what he established here is Elokei haMelech is a lower level, is referring to how Elokei from the word koyach, that's referring to, David haMelech is referring to the whole world that is being created by the divine as it manifests in a concealed and way after the tzimtzum, which is Malchus, Elokei haMelech. It's basically Elokei haMelech, he would translate then the koyach of the Melech. The koyach Elokei, the divine power force of the king to be a king, which is to create the world, which comes only from Malchus. So it's a world that requires a diminished dimension where the higher levels, higher than Malchus, even Midas, ultimately is not going to create a world that's separate from you. In other words, if God wanted to create the world only with his, let's say, love and his emotions, he could have children. He could have neshamas alone. He doesn't need a distant. Doesn't need a world that's independent completely from him. A world that is essentially independent and has to choose. But not memshala, but meaning an entity that chooses. Because if you created children, which means neshamas alone, then you don't have the world that we know. Okay.
Is the tzimtzum also constant, or it happened once?
No. There's no once. It's always. Everything is constant. There's no time in these things. It's all conceptual. So the tzimtzum ceased to be a tzimtzum. We would
after he did this. There's no after.
Right. Even that is alone a whole discussion. How do you understand before and after when we are people of that? Right.
The reason why it's perpetual.
But this forces you to start thinking in terms, again, the same thing. It forces you to think godly when you have to think. Because the most important part, by the way, is always in this, is to realize your way of thinking is wrong. See, when we say, I mentioned this, we say, what happened, what was the minute before Bereshis bara Elokei, the minute before God created you. So they tell us there was no before. Time itself is created, which always throws your mind for a loop. It's like a real kohen, because that's always like.
Kohen is a Zen expression.
Not
Not a kohen like you were.
Also, kohen is a walking paradox.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it's a paradox.
It's a Zen expression.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate kohen.
Clap with one hand.
Right, exactly. The sound of one hand clapping. It means to say, it's trying to force you to realize that your logic tools are limited, and they shouldn't be the defining all, beginning and end, and all. What's the word for it? The all of it all. What the expression? You say something. This is the.
Oh yeah.
All encompassing.
No, yeah.
You know,
There are some.
not Razandet. No.
Razandet.
The beginning and end of all of everything is reality based on our logic. So the first thing you come to understand, what makes you think is like this. Okay, as I said, if before didn't exist, so that means there's a reality that's not bound by time, which itself needs a little thinking. Everything we know is past, present, future. What means something not bound by time?
Quantum reality.
So one way to come to, even beyond that, because one way to come to understand it is like, think of this, let's say this is time. So what's this? What's this here? This is time, everything here. Shit al fishin. All the time is in this cup. What's here? So it makes you start thinking there's something that is not in time. Hold on, I'm going to get. The challenge really is, how from when you're inside here, can you understand this? That's the problem. Because here everything is before, after, and this. This is not a before because there's no before, after. So in a way you could understand no time, but to understand with time, understand no time, that's the real problem.
It's like quantum is so difficult, but it's
Right.
established.
No, but my point that I'm trying to make is like this. That you have to
Actually,
end up
within
thinking
time,
like
they've
this.
done
No, you have to
experiments.
end up thinking that if you're speaking
So
from
there's
God,
no
if you look through God's eyes, there is no issue of time. There's no time. There's a reality that's always there, doesn't change. In that reality, God shows there should be a segment that He's dedicating to time, which will be shit al fishnet. It will be 6,000 years from our perspective. From God's perspective, it's in 1 second or no second, and it's maybe 6 midas. All it is, it's chesed, gura, teferes, and that's chesed manifesting itself in a physical world looks like 1,000 years. But don't take your 1,000 years so seriously. All it is just an energy flow for 1,000 years. From the energy perspective, it's just energy. That's all it is. And then there's another energy. Now, it's hard for us to relate to that because we are in it. And the example I often give about this is, just an imaginary example, but I think it works to some extent. You're riding on a boat down a river. The river is the river of time. So yesterday is where you were in the boat. Yesterday. So you see certain sights. Today you're here, now you see sights. Tomorrow there's going to be new sights that you don't see yet. But you right now, wherever you are in time, which is, let's say, this Sunday morning, this is what we see. Now imagine there's a bird flying above. And this bird, sees what yesterday, today, and tomorrow, because it sees more than we see. But the bird is up there. It's not connected to us. We have no communication with that bird. But then let me believe the bird flies down on your shoulder. And you're now in the boat. And it can talk to you. And it can tell you. Not so much, we're not talking about seeing the future. It just tells you there's a bigger picture here. Don't think that this is all here. So if you think about it, really the bird is the neshama. The neshama does not think in terms of yesterday, today. It thinks godly. It thinks, where's a godly opportunity? It's bound by time because it's forced to be inside the body. But by its essential nature is not a spatial one. It's not defined. It's the same thing. Where does the soul go to? Here's another good exercise. Everyone asks, where does the soul go to when we die? So I always answer this, and it's such a simple answer, and you right away see how limited we are. The question is arrogant. It makes it sound like we're where it's at, and you wonder, where does the soul go to? So here's an imaginary conversation between a refrigerator and electricity. The refrigerator asks electricity, where do you go to when they pull the plug? And you shut the switch. Electricity says, what kind of chutzpah is that? I've been around from all of time. I'm everywhere. I go back to my natural place. You just came around the last 100 years. They invented a little box called a refrigerator. Now you think that you're Yatcha B'dam. You think, there's nothing but the box. The box is asking, where does electricity go? You're a little box. You know nothing about outside of your box. So the box is asking now, where do you go? What do you mean where I'm going? Where'd you come from? You're the novelty, not me. I go back to my, let's call it amorphous space, wherever electricity resides. As a matter of fact, electricity is confined in the box. I'm limited by you. And you're not telling me that where do I go? Where'd you come from? You get the idea. Now, when you think about it, of course, it makes complete sense. It's ridiculous. The part is going to dictate the whole. Me and you and your perspective is going to decide, reality is what I see today. What do you mean? You weren't around all the time. When Eve asked God all those big questions, God says, were you there when I created heaven and earth? He asked me all these, The point was not to give him an end. The point was, there's a mystery here. First be humble to realize you know very little about a very little piece. You don't even know about yourself. How much do we know about this little human being inside us? How much do we really know? Potential. How much potential do we have? Have you fulfilled 5% of it, 1%, 100? First, you have to know how much potential there is to be able to say how much percent. The answer is, I have no clue. We have no clue. When you're forced, when you're pressured, you suddenly realize you have more koyach than you. No, my point is, this is again not meant to diminish what we know. It's meant to realize that the tools we use are very, very, very limited. That's in space. And the same thing with time. Time is a structure. That's really what it is. Structure defined by present, past, and future. But in Ruchnius, time is really Kedima V'Yecher. Chochma didn't come before Bina, but it's before because Bina can't be without it. It's a cause and effect. So it's a matter of really learning to think abstractly. Why are we saying all of this? I don't even know. What's relevance to this, what we're discussing
I
here?
asked if Simpson was constant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the big, big questions we were asked by Rabbi when we first learned Chassidus, he would say, does anybody know what century did the Tzimtzum Harishon happen? So actually, a guy got up and says he thinks it happened in the 2nd or 3rd century. But no, forced us to think. Then, of course, the follow-up question is, where is Atzilus? Between Neptune and Uranus, or they haven't yet found it in telescope. The answer is, Atzilus is right here. It's within everything. We're subatomic particles.
No left. Most should have this question.
No, because we think spatially. I know that. We think in spatial terms. By us, things are we're very, when I say Megushim, it's not because we're grub. We're born, the Tzimtzum did its job. It made sure that we will be very limited in our perception. It's very hard to understand things that are outside of our box. Like when people say, I think out of the box. I said, first let's figure out what's your box before you know what's out of the box.
Let's think in the box.
Yeah, think in the box. Start thinking. What is it? What is a box? By the way, this is exactly, if you want to put Ayin Beis in real contemporary terms, to understand what's outside of the box, the first 46 chapters explain what the box is like. Because you can't transcend a box that you have no clue what the box is. And you have to know how strong that box is, how much it traps you before you can say, oh, I want to be free from it. You're not so free. There's no lech lecha ma'atzecha until you know that you're trapped somewhere. You got to understand the enemy. And here's not the enemy, it's the structure. But this is it. I mean, the truth is, look, listen, each of us have different minds. Some of us are more abstract. You can think get quantum pretty quickly. And some takes time, and some will never get it. Because it's not, this is for everybody. Not everybody has to necessarily have a complete comprehension of what abstraction is. In the Meir Nevuchim writes, the Alter Rebbe brings it in Pekudei. He says that to really understand God, you have to have Yediyas Hashlila, which means extrapolation. You can understand things through interpolation, which is, I see a table, I see you, I see a chair. You can analyze it. I mean, it doesn't mean understand it all, but you get some sense. There are things, the only way you can know is by process of elimination. He says in Chutei that through enough shlilas, you come almost to chiyuv. It can almost be like you understand it directly, but there's enough shlilah. The Rebbe once said in the Fabrengen, Chav Zayin, Tavshin Chav Zayin, and then the Fabrengen, the Rebbe said, no, so say L'chaim Levracha. The Rebbe said L'chaim, and then no one else did. So the Rebbe said, by me saying it, I was not Yetzi you all. You have to know. So everybody started saying L'chaim. So the Rebbe smiled and said, here we see an example how Shlila brought the Chiyuv. Because if I had not said, by saying, I'm the only one that said it, then no one else, I was not Yetzi you, not. Came a yes, that you all said L'chaim. I mean, the point I want to make is like this. I always give an example for this. It's I think also a good example. And it's very good for therapy and psychology in general. No one's ever seen the unconscious. The Rebbe Rashab could talk about it. First of all, he's there probably. And also, that Rizal, it's Chaim, I mean, they reveal these levels. We know them because they told us. We could extrapolate, and you see secular psychology has figured out there's an unconscious. But to say much about it is very hard to say because no one's ever seen it. No one's ever seen a soul. What does your soul look like? And it's even hard to imagine because we start imagining it on our terms. Electricity, is a shtickle muscle. Maybe God created quantum mechanics to show us what invisible energy looks like, so to speak. Not looks like, but how its properties. So here's the thinking. So I always use an example like this. Imagine a wall is enveloped, covered in darkness, shrouded in darkness. You can't touch the wall. You can't shine a light on it. Could you figure out what the wall is like? So think a minute, how would you do that? I can't go over, I can't touch it. I can't shine a light. There's no one on the wall that I can talk to. It's just there. So there's one way. You bounce a ball. You can bounce a ball on the wall. No one said you can't. I'm just giving an example, of course. So you bounce a ball. You bounce, you still don't see the wall, but you see how it bounces back. It bounces back to the right. It must be a little jag. You keep bouncing enough times, you can make a pretty good map of the wall. Perfect? No, but better than when you began, a lot better. Similar thing is even in medicine or psychology. A doctor, you come to a doctor, God forbid, I have a little pain. He says, where's the pain? My arm. He touches here. Suddenly you start feeling, it hurts me here. It gets closer. What's the doctor, as a trained practitioner? He's through passive elimination, he's identifying what area, and therefore probably what is the problem. He can't see it. I mean, he can take an X-ray, but for now he's doing that. Or in conversation, a good therapist or a good soul doctor, you speak to someone and you say, my marriage isn't working, or I can't find a job, or I can't function. So you start talking to the person. A trained person starts asking the right questions, and you often see where a person doesn't want to talk about it. They say, I don't want to go there. You say, why not? Because it's definitely not the problem. Rest assured, that's where the problem is. That's where he doesn't want to go, because it's sensitive. So it's like the nerve. So a good person, you don't have to go on full assault and attack somebody's psyche, but a good person was going to realize where the area is. Tell me the relationship with your mother. No, it's nothing to do with my mother.
That's the back pain. That's the sensitivity that comes out.
Right. Tell me what relationship with your father. No, it's nothing to do with my father, not my mother. It's something else completely. It's the grocery store. You know what I mean? So the point I'm making here is, what is a good guy doing? He can't see what's going on inside. He was also not there in our childhood. But enough questions, and it's like bouncing the ball, and you start seeing resistance, where a person talks, how they react to things. You see, for example, you even provoke them. They get very angry. Someone else won't get angry. Why? So my point is that we have the capacity, this is the wisdom God gave us, the capacity through different means, different tools to somewhat get a glimpse of a reality that is not the one we usually see. That's like Yediyas Hashlila. This is called, it's not just Yediyas Hashlila saying God is not chesed. Like you say, Chochem v'lei b'chochem Yediyah. We're not just saying, that he's so beyond. He has chochma, but you can't define him by chochma. So you start realizing, okay, not this, not that. So I'm finite. I die. God doesn't die, so to speak. We are limited. I mean, my point that I'm trying to say is that Chassidus teaches us methods that you begin to relate to another reality. And sometimes the first step, not sometimes, always the first step, is realizing that what you know is a very limited perspective. That's these challenges. So you realize, one second, how I understand time is wrong, or limited, how I understand space is limited. Even the Ragachover, who's Nigla, if you really look at his brilliance, because he looked at the Gemara, he saw something most of us don't see. He saw like almost what makes a tick, as opposed to its manifestation. Now here's halacha, like he looked at the din of Sfir Shemer. So why can't we count every day and you miss a day? So what? So you go on. Because there's something about an entity of time that you can't have 49 without 48. You can't have 48 without 1. So the question is time made up of parts? Like say, God forbid, someone's Machal Shabbos. So the question is that it? Your Shabbos is over? Is it one entity, right? All right? Right. Or, no, every second is like a new entity. Now it's still Shabbos. So from that, he abstracts, what is time? Is time made up of particles? Or is time a flow? Which touches on a whole spiritual, even philosophical concept. Things are klal and prat. He basically stripped halachas from their manifestation to their theory. What is the essence of the argument here? Koyach and Poel, Shammai and Hillel. They argue about, they go according to the potential, you go according to the actual. My point is that these are methods that take a mind to another dimension of understanding things. So that way, the Ragat Shavar, maybe this is, I don't know if the Rebbe ever said it, but the Ragat Shavar, the Rebbe, of course, was speaking of the Ragat Shavar. The Ragat Shavar is basically Chassidus with a nigla. It's not Chassidus, because he said actually that someone, which I did, someone Tzedek blessed me to be Bal Nigla, because he had a bracha from someone Tzedek. But first of all, the Rebbe brings that one place, he does bring Kabbalah from the Rambam, but his way of thinking is very Chassidish way of thinking, meaning stripping something from, going into the Atzilus of it, rather than looking at the Asiya of it. He does that, technically that's what he does. And once you go where he goes, it's much easier to explain things like Chassidus, because he's already talking like Koyach and Poel, where you talk what is time, and so on. I mean, just these are methods of I'm saying it specifically for the record, because I think besides learning Ayin Beis, it's learning new tools of how to think. That, I think, is the greatest challenge of all. Now, if we taught this when we were young like this, it would be tremendous. But no one tells us this. No one told this to me. We started learning 16, 17, some chassidus. We learned it like we learn Shulchan Aruch, 100%. Facts. There's this. Not to say, listen, but it was never challenged. I mean, the first time I really was taken by a chassidish concept, I remember very vividly. I was going through my own questions, the relevance. There's a guy in camp. He we had a conversation. I said to him, tell me, where's the thinking man's Torah, so to speak? She says, what do you mean, the Gemara is full of it? I said, yeah, I understand that's like thinking, understanding. I mean to think out of the structure. So he showed me a Bidirectional Sefer, which, this may sound funny today. To me, it's funny, because today I wouldn't be so impressed by it. But so it showed me that someone said he brings, now Manas Elokei, he brings the proof, one of the proofs that, I think he brings it in the early Ayin Beis also. One of the proofs that you can't say existence always existed is because existence is finite. And all the finites in the world will never create infinity. I always loved mathematics. It wasn't just mathematics. That intrigued me. I started thinking about it. When you're 16 years old, I don't know how, 15, 16, 16. Thing like that can change, really take you for a loop. I started thinking, that does make sense. Absolutely. All the numbers in the world will never lead to infinity. So how could I say that existence is infinite? Now, I understand there's arguments you could start saying it's not infinite, but it goes on forever. Who knows how long? But what do I mean? But at the end of the day, when you go to the end, it's not infinite. There's some beginning. It wasn't about proving God to me. It was more that I saw that there's another way to look at things. You start thinking, 1 second, this world is a finite world. And is finite everything? I remember a second epiphany I had. I'm just giving you my aha moments, okay? I remember my parents rented a place in the summer by Bell Harbor. Here, after Kings Plaza, you go over the bridge, Rockaway, over the Marine Parkway Bridge. So, and I was here because they were working, so it was nice for the summer. It was only a half-hour drive from Manhattan. So I used to go there sometimes at night, and it's on the ocean. And I'd go outside to the beach. You stand by an ocean one night, you get a sense of magnitude, The world is busy, it's all asleep. This ocean doesn't stop. I remember sensing, what it says in Chassidus, Lo Yush Beisu, Ke'echa Ein Seif, that define infinite power in nature. It's relentlessness. Infinite, but it's definitely beyond anything. I remember, and that's when I connected with that Bidirectional Sefer. I started thinking about 1 second, what's reality in the first place? What's reality? I'm giving you the equivalent that some people did through through other journeys with some substances. This is how I did it naturally. And you started realizing that we don't really get it. 1 second, we have no clue. We're just in this limited box. And there's a whole other reality, the power of things, the awesomeness of things. So I guess this goes back to Elokei haMelech, aromemcho. So it's about lifting the divine power within existence to beyond that. That's what he's saying here. So to begin to explain this, he went through the whole thing of koyach. So let's do the keter. It goes like this: keter Rabbi Inyan Yagdim Ashakos aromemcho Elokei haMelech. To understand all this, Bidirectional, to explain it, we'll preface by what it says in Elokei haMelech. Reimus ubchinas keser shebekes, shalamayla matzilas. Reimus is keser within keser. That's higher than Atzilus, and Shas Chalosim Mechatzein is Chochmas Tamo. The beginning of Atzilus, the Ramaz wrote, is the outer dimension of the concealed or the unconscious wisdom. The Ikar HaReimamus, a primary exaltation or exalted above state is Pnimis HaKeser. Shalamayim al-Mokar Latzilus is the inner dimension of Keser, the crown that's higher than the source of Atzilus. So it's not just how the desire wants existence, it's how he is in his essence. V'achov aromemcho moira lamshoches hareimus. And the long chav, because he has the question, so where are you lifting it? So he says it's not lifting it, it's bringing it down. Aromemcho refers that he's drawing down that beyond state. Gam l'reimem, and also, one second, that's this. And Gam l'reim Elokei haMelech hu moker el b'chinas malchus. And it's also to lift up Elokei haMelech, which is the source of the world's malchus. That's the second meaning. So there's one mamayla lamata, one mamata lamata. From above down and from below up. Why? Because not below up. The chochma being a lamayla mailus. Chochma being wisdom and understanding is above the worlds. And emotions are really not strangers. It's also possible with those that are close. Kingship is explicitly on those that are apart, separate from him. And it's true to haRatzon haMelech is the will, the desire to rule. I should rule. Because of that, there was the tzimtzum, the concealment of the divine essence and the divine light. In order for nefrodim, separate entities, to emerge, then you can have melucha. Okay.
The interesting thing is that this Haddish coming.
So we stop here. 1 second. Page 623, chapter 305. We went through now pages 621 through 623 in volume 1 of Ayin Beis.